The survival game grabbed me on my way to work and dropped me alone on a mountain, a rotting thatched hut for shelter, no quit button, and a warning that dying here only turned a player into someone's livestock. Everyone else chased weapons and combat skills. I drew the plant modification technique and chose planting, the profession the whole zone laughed at. And then my crops grew at double speed, my flowers became amplifiers, and one plant stood up as a servant. The farmer they wrote off had the only cheat that kept growing. Pre-story checkpoint, drop a like and subscribe. The channel only exists because you do. All of that came after a quiet, ordinary morning. Let me take you back there first. A voice dragged me out of nowhere and welcomed me to the survival game. And the first thing it made clear was that there was no option to quit. It went on to tell me that a player who died did not simply vanish, but got turned into a conscious creature with no control over itself, dropped into the world as a wild creature, somebody's farmed animal, or a servant in another player's home. I jolted upright with that single word still hanging in my throat, and a translucent panel floated in front of my face with several lines of text scrolling across it. 1 minute I had finished breakfast and was getting ready to head to work, and the next I was a player in a survival game, whatever that was supposed to mean. The panel announced that my player information, the mall, the exchange, and the chat channel were all enabled, and since I was already here, overthinking it seemed like a waste of time. I told the panel to open my player information, and the text dissolved into a fresh interface with explanations beside every line. My player ID read as Mountain Forest Zone 9655, player number 11. Yu-Wu, one of 100,000 to a subzone at the start. My race was human, with a warning that the human strength range swings wildly. My class sat at none, and to earn a class selection card I'd have to clear the novice missions in my survival manual. The choice permanent once made and steering my daily missions and rewards forever after. My energy read 36 out of 50, and my stamina 43 out of 50, both limits raisable through exercise or items, both drained by crafting and labor and skills. The panel listed my combat power as 5, which it kindly explained meant an ordinary adult who had never cultivated and had no special abilities. A real confidence builder. My skill slot was empty, as was pets, both obtainable through chests or trades or the mall. My equipment was a novice attributeless coarse cloth 3-piece set that would dissolve after 3 days. My assets were nothing, and my survival points stood at a flat 0. The inventory showed 3 of 10 slots filled, a survival mission manual, a level 0 damaged thatched hut, and a level 1 skill book marked random. I read all of it twice before touching anything. I opened the mall next, and it told me I had no survival points, and therefore nothing to buy. There was an empty slot at the bottom, an item recycling slot that paid out 1/10 of the mall's selling price for anything I dumped into it. Highway robbery, and they weren't even pretending otherwise. The exchange came up without locked requirements, just 3 subcategories. The first was a selling slot for trading materials or survival points, with a plus icon that asked for 1,000 survival points to unlock a second slot, so since I owned exactly 0 of those, I let it be. The middle subcategory was for buying empty and nothing listed. The third was the auction, which actually explained its own rules. An item's starting price equaled the mall's recycling value. Listings sold only for survival points, and an auction could run anywhere from 30 minutes to 12 hours. If nobody bid by the end, the item got recycled at the starting price, and either way, win or recycle, the system skimmed 10% off the top as a handling fee. Nothing here was worth my time while I was broke, so I switched to the chat channel. The chat channel header told me my Mountain Forest Zone 9655 had 99,999 players left out of 100,000, which meant one of us was already gone. Dead. Probably. The feed itself was completely blank, and when I tapped the input area to ask why, the answer made me wince. To keep the channel from flooding with noise, every single character cost money, 1/10 of a survival point each up to 1,000, and a full point each beyond. With everyone freshly broke, nobody was talking. I'd seen everything the panels would show me, so I went back to my inventory. I pulled out the survival manual first, and it told me my novice missions were unlocked. The first one was straightforward enough, instructing me to find a spot I liked, and place the thatched hut before dark, which it set at 6 in the evening, with a hard warning that the hut could never be moved once placed, and that surviving the night without a house would be nearly impossible. There was plenty of time, since it was only noon. I looked around and found nothing but mountains, slope after slope studded with trees that grew wherever they pleased, bushes and patches of grass scattered between them. The peaks in the distance climbed higher and higher in stacked layers, each one taller than the last. I was standing on a mountaintop with a gentle slope falling away below me, and I couldn't tell from up here whether the bottom held forest or grassland, or how far down it even went. I have never been the type to go hill climbing for fun, so I had 0 intention of hiking down to scout the neighbors. Instead, I found a flatter patch nearby and set down the level 0 damaged thatched hut. The manual chimed that the first mission was complete and a reward pack had been distributed, then immediately handed me the second one, which told me to step inside and light a fire that would warm the house and let me boil water and cook. A small reward pack appeared in my inventory slot at the same moment. Then I actually looked at the thatched hut, and the word damage turned out to be doing a lot of heavy lifting. It covered maybe 6 square meters, a footprint of 3 by 2 meters with eaves a little over 2 meters with eaves a little over 2 meters high, and a roof peaking at 3. The size I could live with, since at least it was technically a house. The problem was that it stood on 10 wrist-thick wooden poles arranged in a rough circle, one every meter, with straw mats tied to their tops and hanging down to pretend they were walls. The roof was a frame of thin forked branches under a thin layer of grass, and the only reason I could see all of this so clearly was that most of the mats and grass had already rotted away, leaving the poles, a few scraps of straw, and some dangling leaves. I pushed through the limp little straw curtain that passed for a door, and opened the first reward pack inside, which turned out to hold 10 pieces of firewood, a box of 10 matches, and a single iron pot, all of them stamped gray quality. Everything landed in my inventory, and when I checked the firewood, it confirmed itself as the most basic burn fuel there was. Thumb-thick branches about half a meter long. Gray quality felt about as encouraging as the rest of my afternoon. I stacked 10 pieces in a crisscross pile, struck a match against the side of the box, and the moment the flame touched the wood, the whole pile caught at once, a campfire reading 20 minutes of burn time. It really was a game mode, and not a subtle one, because no real branch lights that fast on contact. Honestly, I'd take it. My own survival knowledge was thin to non-existent, so if matches lit firewood instantly, it meant I could probably pull off all sorts of things I had never learned and never even heard of. The manual marked the second mission done, issued another reward pack, and gave me a third, telling me to place a wooden bed since a bed inside a house sped up recovery. I glanced at the campfire ticking down its 20 minutes, and opened the new pack which produced one damaged single wooden bed in gray quality. Even the bed was broken. I set the bed against the wall, and dilapidated was generous, since it was only 50 centimeters wide and its 10 centimeter boards already had chunks missing here and there. The panel rated it as gray quality, boosting my recovery by an extra 1% while resting, with a durability of 3 out of 3, which meant I'd be lucky to sleep on it a few nights before it folded under me. Still, the mission was the point, so the manual logged it complete, issued the pack, and handed me the fourth mission, which told me to use my level 1 skill book, the random one, to learn my first skill. This time it wanted me to learn something from inventory, rather than open a reward. I took out the skill book, and it really was a book, sealed inside a fist-sized bubble of air so I couldn't touch it. I held it and silently willed it to activate, and the bubble popped, the book breaking into a film of white light that sank into my body. The panel announced I'd obtained the level 1 plant modification technique, marked the mission complete, issued its pack, and gave me the 5th and final novice mission, telling me to choose a profession direction that would shape my daily missions and rewards, and to choose carefully. By then, I had 2 unopened reward packs stacking up, so I opened them first. The first held a wooden pillow and a straw mat, both gray quality, both meant for that pitiful bed. I spread the straw mat out and the bed looked marginally less fragile, but with only 3 points of durability between me and the floor. I wasn't about to lie on it and waste them. The second pack held a single profession selection card marked as a unique item, and holding it up showed me my 5 choices: hunting, gathering, planting, breeding, and crafting, with not one word of explanation between them. So I checked the skill I'd just learned instead, and the answer made itself obvious. The plant modification technique could only be used on planted crops. Its effect listed as unknown, restricted at level 1 to level 1 or lower crops, and it ate 100 energy per use. A skill locked entirely to planting made the decision for me, so I picked planting without a second thought. The manual confirmed the choice, declared the novice missions over, and issued a farming profession grand reward pack, while the system congratulated me on finishing the tutorial and opened my planting daily missions on the manual. I sat down on the ground and opened the grand pack first, hoping the modification skill would keep it from being a complete trap. It poured out a set of white quality farming tools, a reclamation hoe, a planting hoe, a harvesting sickle, 2 buckets and a winnowing basket, along with 100 unopened seeds whose types were still a mystery. I left the seeds packed for the moment, since opening them would identify them, and I'd rather not deal with sorting a dozen different kinds into separate slots before I had anywhere to put them. Then I checked my first planting daily mission, which told me to reclaim land for planting, progress 0 out of 10, with a reward of 10 survival points and a small planting gift pack. Plant 10 seeds and I was done. Of course, planting isn't exactly the kind of work you can harvest the same hour you sow it, and right then I had nothing to eat and nothing to drink. Maybe the mall stocked food. I picked up the iron reclamation hoe and went out to break ground about 3 meters from the house, opening the chat channel to see if anyone had surfaced. 5 minutes in, plenty of players should be done with the tutorial, a few willing to spend money just to say something. Someone announced they'd unlocked a healing skill and invited people to add them, pointing out how precious healing was. Someone else reported treasure chests out in the wilderness, and another said the mall sold food. A few were hunting relatives. one calling out for a Lee Don from a particular district, signed by a Lee Myung. A crafting player offered processing services, an islander asked fellow islanders to add him, and a lonely soul just wanted somebody to chat with. Plenty of chatter, most of it a handful of words. The relative hunting I scrolled right past, because in my 22 years I'd already lost more than my share, my family and everything we owned evaporating in a single day. What vanished was the affection, the part that actually mattered. I still had blood relatives technically, but I wouldn't call them family. I'd call them people I would kill on sight if I ever crossed paths with them again. I shook the irritation off and kept reading. Watching the channel didn't slow my digging, and after half an hour my thin stamina had bled down to 11 points. I'd cleared about 20 square meters at my feet, hoeing 20 centimeters into the dirt, picking out grass roots and gravel, breaking up clods and leveling it until the panel rated it plantable farmland. I sat on the grass and started opening seeds one at a time, since random meant pure luck. The first was a level 0 leek seed, gray quality, and a seed is a seed, so I tucked it along the edge of the patch. The second came up wheat, also level 0, and a grain crop suited me fine, so I buried it beside the leek. The third was finally better, a level 1 cucumber seed in white quality, which I planted at the far edge. The rest came up level 0 across the board. A potato, 2 chili peppers, 2 cabbages, and 2 eggplants, which finished off my 10 and completed the mission. The panel awarded 10 survival points and a small planting gift pack, and I opened it to find a single level 1 flower pot, white quality, a mobile planting tool that had to be filled with level 1 soil before it could grow anything. A tiny oval thing I could cradle in both hands, and empty, with no soil to spare. All I could do was set it back inside the hut. Each crop now displayed its growth status, harvest time, and number of harvests. The eggplant and chili pepper read normal, harvestable in 72 hours, good for 3 harvests each, while the leek was normal too, harvestable in 48, good for 9. Leeks, eggplants, and chilies were repeat harvest crops, while wheat and cabbage and potatoes were one and done, their growth times all over the map, cabbage at 48 hours, potatoes at 72, wheat at 96. The level 1 cucumber was the slowest, harvestable in 120 hours. 3 harvests a full 5 days for a single vine. I figured that normal label wouldn't stay normal forever, since farming surely came with its share of dry spells and pests and missing fertilizer. The seeds would grow on their own time, so I opened them all with my 10 survival points to see what they bought. Not much. There were exactly 5 items, each priced at 10 survival points, a portion of drinking water, a loaf of bread, a steamed bun, a level 1 wooden hut upgrade blueprint, and a level 1 fence crafting blueprint. Food and drink and the makings of a better house and field. None of it quite right to spend my entire fortune on, since buying any single thing would drop me straight back to 0. Better to head out and gamble on a level 1 wilderness treasure chest. I carried my tools back into the hut and set them on the ground, glanced at the dead campfire, and took out the matchbox, now down to 9 matches. Tidied up, I had only 90 unopened seeds and the survival manual left in my inventory. I stepped outside, scanned around for my mountaintop, and picked south. The immediate ground was nothing but thick dead grass with the occasional fresh blade poking through, and a little farther on, small delicate flowers, until at 200 or 300 meters the trees began. A poplar here, a pine there, a locust beyond. All of them tagged level 1 and harvestable. I couldn't cut any of them down without an axe, but branches snap, so I reached up and broke a few off. The panel logging firewood, gray quality, 1 piece and then 2. Gray items couldn't be traded, and firewood only burned, but burning was exactly what I'd need once dark fell. So I snapped branches as I walked. I left the big limbs alone and took only the easy ones, since I had to nurse my stamina between consumption and recovery. By the time one inventory slot held over 200 pieces of firewood, I finally spotted a level 1 wilderness treasure chest half buried under dead leaves, a flat wooden box of a thing. I picked up a stone and lobbed it to flush out anything lurking, and when nothing stirred I went over and opened it. It gave me a level 1 wooden hut upgrade blueprint, a felling axe, and 2 portions of drinking water, all 3 dropping into my slots. Not bad at all. I pulled out a portion of water and it came packaged the same way the skill book had been. An air layer wrapped around it, except cylindrical, with no lid, so taking it out just left a cup of water in my hand. It was maybe 500 milliliters, and once I'd taken a few sips it wouldn't go back in the slot, since a partial portion no longer matched a full one and items of different quantities can't stack. Thirsty enough to finish the whole cup, I watched the empty cup blink out of existence the moment the water was gone, the same way the chest had vanished the instant its contents auto-collected. The water did real work though, jumping my stamina recovery up fast. I dropped to 8 points, and after about 5 minutes I was back to 13, roughly a point a minute until the boost faded. No notification for any of it, so I chalked it up to my body rehydrating. Resting there, I pulled out the level 1 wooden hut upgrade blueprint to study it, a rolled up sheet of paper still sealed in its air bubble, untouchable but functional, because owning it had already added a house upgrade mission to my manual. The mission needed the blueprint, which I had, plus 200 level 1 wood, which I didn't. In exchange for a wooden hut with a floor of 3 by 5 meters, defense 10, and durability 1000. Compared to my pitiful collapsing thatched shack, that sounded like luxury, so I gripped my felling axe and got ready to earn it. A better house meant sleeping without wondering whether the roof would land on me, and frankly the bed could wait, since even if it caved in mid-sleep I'd still be inside four walls. The axe bit into a poplar and left only a notch, no instant drop, so I worked around the trunk the way I'd seen people do on television, chipping a ring as best I could. The poplar was about 10 centimeters across, and each swing cost a point of the axe's durability. After 7 swings, I put the axe away and shoved at the trunk above the notch until it toppled, the panel rewarding me 3 pieces of level 1 wood and 36 of firewood as the whole tree stump and all dissolved into my slots. 7 swings for 3 pieces of wood out of a 100 durability axe meant gathering 200 was going to be a slog. My stamina had slid to 9, so I kept walking, hunting for more treasure chests, since opening a chest had to beat hacking through a forest one tree at a time. I scanned as I went, ready to sit the moment recovery couldn't keep up, snapping easy branches along the way. The skill nagged at me since the cheapest it could run was 100 energy, and my limit was only 50, which made owning a skill I literally could not cast its own flavor of frustrating. Still, I couldn't sneer at my own weakness, since the panel called me a normal adult human player, untrained and ordinary, and the humans I'd known back home were no different. Around 2:30 I found my second level 1 chest on flat grassland, and after a thrown stone confirmed it was safe I opened it for 10 pieces of level 1 wood, 2 portions of water, and 2 loaves of bread. Water and food and wood all at once put me in a fine mood, and the items filled 8 of my 10 slots with 2 to spare. I kept circling the hillside, and after a while it struck me that I hadn't seen a single animal anywhere. My range wasn't huge, but creatures leave traces, and there were none, which made me wonder if the novice period simply kept beasts away from a farming player with no fences and tender crops at his doorstep. That actually sounded reasonable. A little after 3, with over 800 portions of firewood already gathered, I found a third chest, and this one came up rich. 2 more pieces of level 1 wood plus a level 1 rabbit cub and a level 1 pheasant chick. Animal young, surely the kind of thing the breeding players wanted, assuming any of them had money yet. I'd only earned the 10 survival points for my daily mission, so out of curiosity I opened the auction to see what these things fetched, and the numbers floored me. The rabbit cub showed a starting price of 10 survival points, a current bid of 65, and 23 minutes left. Since the starting price equaled the mall recycling rate, and recycling paid a tenth of the mall selling price, that meant a level 1 rabbit cub sold in the mall for a full 100 survival points apiece. No matter the world, there's never a shortage of rich people. The bid sat at 65 for now and surely wouldn't top 100, since anyone could just buy direct. But I had no intention of raising livestock myself, so I listed both animals at once, 10-point starting prices, 30-minute timers each, and let them go. Auctions didn't tie up inventory slots, which made sense since the listing was final and I couldn't take an item back even if nobody bid. Poking around while I searched, I found seeds listed too, level 1 crop seeds at the same starting prices as the animals, while every gray level 0 seed couldn't even be sold. The bigger surprise was the materials. Someone had bundled 200 level 1 wood into a single lot, the bidding already up to 2,890 against a starting price of 400, which put the mall price at 20 per piece, 4,000 for the lot, making the auction a bargain. Wood was a material every player needed, so the bidding made sense, but the real question gnawed at me. We'd all arrived at noon, and somehow by mid-afternoon people had piled up enough survival points to throw thousands around. Cultivators, maybe, or players born with special abilities, farming materials at a frantic pace, or tearing through chests faster than I ever could. And there were different races. My own race tag warned that the human strength range swings wildly, so what about the others? If some races came in already powerful and the weak got mixed with the strong, I had to wonder whether players like me had any real way to survive at all. I lay back to rest, and the answer circled to those first few prompts I'd been too rattled to take seriously. Dying here didn't free you, it just dropped you into the world as some other creature with no control over yourself. Doing work no easier than this. Nobody had asked my consent to be dragged in either, so the only move was the obvious one. Stay alive and keep grinding. After a short rest, I looped back toward the hilltop, finding another level 1 chest in a spot I hadn't searched, since they clustered thick near home. This chest paid out 50 survival points, a level 1 stamina enhancement potion, and a pair of level 1 cotton pants in white quality, all auto-collected into my now full inventory. A stamina enhancement potion stopped me cold, and I sat down to check it. It came packaged like the water cups, only tiny, a thumb pad of a thing, and the panel called it an enhancement item that strengthened the body, raising maximum stamina by somewhere between 5 and 20 per use. Good for 50 uses with 0 use so far. How much it actually gave seemed to ride on luck, or maybe on how well my body absorbed it, and 50 uses felt like a horizon so far off I couldn't see it. Mostly I was curious what the thing was worth, so I searched the auction for enhancement items. I found some, and the listing read, Level 1 Stamina Enhancement Potion, starting price 0, current bid 1,990, over 8 hours left. A starting price of 0 stopped me. so I opened the details and found a note that the mall held no sales information for this item. The mall didn't sell enhancement potions at all, which meant no reference price, no recycle value, and whatever it fetched depended entirely on player bids. If they couldn't be bought from the mall, odds were every enhancement item had to be found in the wild by your own hands. Either way, I wasn't going to dwell on it, and since it wasn't dark yet, I'd use the potion at home and see how much stamina I gained. Standing up to head back, I caught the stamina potion's bid still climbing on the auction, and then I noticed a prompt telling me survival points were waiting to be withdrawn. After my 2 animals sold, there'd been no alert, and I'd simply forgotten to collect. The rabbit cub had gone for 93 survival points, minus a 9.3 auction fee, leaving 83.7 to claim, and the pheasant chick for 94, minus 9.4, leaving 84.6. Each had to be withdrawn on its own, so I pulled both, and my survival points finally crossed into 3 digits. The panel noted I now held 228.3, with the reminder that only whole numbers could be spent, the fractional remainder good only for accumulating. My panel had shifted across the board. My energy read 21 out of 50, my stamina wrung out 10, combat power still 5, my plant modification technique at level 1. My assets now listed the thatched hut and a planting field of 23 square meters. My survival points sat at 228.3, and my inventory was packed full at 10 of 10. It held the manual and 90 random seeds, over 1,000 pieces of gray firewood, 23 level 1 wood, 3 waters, 2 loaves of bread, the wooden hut blueprint, the felling axe at 93%, the potion, and the cotton pants. Only the novice equipment still carried its disappearing in 3 days note now, every other annotation gone quiet. I decided to drink the potion at home rather than out here, since if it left me writhing on the floor in pain, I'd rather not be wearing brand new pants and wearing down their durability for nothing. Home was just ahead, so with stamina no longer worth conserving, I ran the rest of the way back. The 10 plants by my doorstep had already sprouted, still reading normal, so I left them alone, pushed through my barely there door, and lit a campfire in the corner with a handful of firewood. The flame burned right beside a hanging scrap of tattered grass curtain without catching it, since this was a digitized world and the grass simply wouldn't ignite. The campfire kept a fixed circular shape, and no matter how much firewood I fed it, the flame never grew. Only the burn time floating above it climbed higher. I sat on the ground laughing at it, reaching a hand close to test the heat, and as long as I kept my fingers out of the flame, I felt only warmth. No burn even pressed right against it. 10 units lit it for 20 minutes, every extra unit adding 2 more, so since it was past 4:30 and firewood couldn't be traded anyway, I dumped every last piece in and built the campfire to 35 hours. I took out a loaf of bread, its air layer popping the moment I bit in, and gnawed through the dry, tasteless palm-sized thing. 2 bites followed by a sip of water, until my stomach finally felt full. After I'd eaten and stepped out for the obvious follow-up, I lay down on my 50-centimeter wreck of a bed and tipped the tiny stamina potion into my mouth. The panel announced the enhancement beginning, and the instant it hit my tongue, my head spun and my whole body went numb. A dizziness I didn't have to fight. A stinging spread through me until I couldn't tell whether it was skin and muscle, or tendon and bone and organ. The whole of me in a grinding ache that never quite crossed into blacking out. Then the panel reported an effective enhancement, stamina limit up 1, and again, and again. The notifications kept coming, and the sound of them was what pulled me back from panic, because each one let me count. 1 point, 2, 3, the limit climbing with every chime, honestly exhilarating even through the pain. By 11 I was clinging to the count, my body wrong all over but my mind steady enough to endure, and the chimes kept coming until somewhere past 15 I caught myself hoping the soreness would stretch on a little longer. Then came the final notification, the enhancement over, the sensation draining out of me all at once. I'd counted exactly 20. The next moment I was asleep. I slept straight through until almost 5 in the morning and woke up hungry, patting my stomach before I remembered where I was. The fire in the corner was a relief, and I crossed to it and sat down. Sleeping that soundly had nearly let me forget this was a survival game, but the fire, burning steady and unbroken, really did hand me a feeling of safety. I'd barely noticed it by day, but at night everything outside turned eerie, and those support poles I'd complained about were now the whole reason this house held together. The ruined mats that anyone could see through in daylight became a real boundary after dark, since beyond the wall line it was black and silent while inside the campfire's reach there was soft warm light. Even the gap-toothed doorway, the see-through walls, the holes in the roof, every shabby piece had turned into an isolation layer keeping the dark out and me in. Outside there was nothing but darkness without a single sound or movement. I took bread from my inventory and ate slowly, a sip of water whenever a dry bite threatened to lodge in my throat, and opened my player information. My energy had recovered to 50 out of 50, my stamina now read 70 out of 70, and my combat power had ticked up to 6. I stared at the 6, since the only notifications I'd gotten were the stamina limit chimes with nothing said about combat power, and the only pattern I could fit was that combat power equaled my energy and stamina limits added and divided by 20. There was no confirmation, but either way I'd gotten stronger, which was all that mattered. What surprised me more was that daybreak ran this late. I pulled the survival manual, which marked it survival game day 2, daytime 8 in the morning to 6 in the evening, weather sunny, temperature 22 to 28 degrees, wind level 1. Today's mission was to reclaim land for planting, progress 0 out of 50 for 50 survival points, and a planting gift pack. 50 plants this time. Broke as I was, the smart move was to ration my seeds carefully. I finished the bread in a cup of water, glanced at my bed now down to 2 durability out of 3, and couldn't make myself burn another point lying on it, so I stretched out on the bare ground instead. With more than 3 hours until daylight, I opened the chat to pass the time. The feed had a player whose fire had gone out, complaining about cold wind blowing through his walls, and the others wasted no sympathy on him. One pointed out the survival points he burned griping could have bought enough level 1 wood to keep a fire going for ages. Another called him extravagant for spending money just to whine, and a third noted that anyone tossing around 3-character messages was clearly rich. Someone admitted the silence really could drive a person crazy, and a couple of players quietly asked whether there were any non-humans among us, getting no answer. The cold fire player kept begging for pity, until someone tallied that he'd already spent 72 survival points on characters that day. 72 points, when Mallwood ran 20 per unit, and a fire needed only 10 units of firewood, or 1 unit of level 1 wood, since the feed said a single level 1 wood burned a full hour. Scrolling back through his earlier posts, I reached the same conclusion the others had, that the man simply had points to spare, and was bored enough to spend them complaining. The hours slid by as I flipped between chat and the auctions, and at exactly 8 in the morning, the darkness outside dissolved in an instant, the sun already risen in the east. I climbed up off the ground, glanced at the campfire still burning without going out, grabbed my reclamation hoe and went out the door. With full stamina and a slightly higher combat power, the land cleared faster than the day before, and I dug alongside yesterday's plot until the field read 50 square meters. With 30-some points of stamina left, I crouched down to plant, pulling seeds out and opening them in my hand, digging holes along the edge and burying them one by one. Yesterday's 10 had all sprouted. The 5-day cucumber managing only 2 leaves, while the cabbage that took 48 hours already had 4 or 5, and the leeks, smaller by nature, just 2 leaves at 5 or 6 centimeters tall. After 50 new seeds, the layout came out a bit messy, but the gaps between crops were generous. Out of the 50, I pulled 6 level 1 seeds and 44 level 0, and beyond the varieties from yesterday, there were new ones. Sweet potatoes, tomatoes, corn, soybeans, peanuts, and red beans. The mission logged complete, 50 out of 50, and paid me 50 survival points and a planting gift pack, which I carried to the grass and opened on the spot. Inside was a level 1 water well construction blueprint, which gave me a moment of pause, since I was on a mountaintop and digging a well up here seemed absurd. The blueprint was the usual rolled paper in an air bubble, and holding it added the construction mission to my manual, which by now I expected. The mission wanted the blueprint plus 23 level 1 wood, which I had, and 50 level 1 stone, which I didn't, for a 1 by 1 meter well that stored 50 liters an hour, usable only for irrigating fields and watering animals. Water players couldn't drink then. I had no stone and couldn't build the well anyway, but since it was capped to those 2 uses, I didn't worry past it. The real obstacle was the 50 level 1 stone, listed at a starting price of 5 survival points, 50 per unit in the mall, 2.5 times the price of wood. I'd pack up, hunt chests, and cut trees along the way, and even though I couldn't build the well yet, I wasn't about to sell the recipe since I might turn up a chest with level 1 stone inside. I went back to the hut, sat by the campfire to rest and tidy up, and noticed my stamina recovered far faster indoors, which made keeping the fire burning around the clock look like a genuinely good idea. The house had gotten cluttered, holding a planting hoe, a harvesting sickle, a winnowing basket, 2 buckets, the empty flower pot, the unused iron pot, the reclamation hoe now at 89%, and the matchbox down to 8 matches. My inventory carried 2 blueprints, the manual, 40 random seeds, a cup of water, 23 level 1 wood, the felling axe, and the white cotton pants. The pants rated white quality, comfort +5, defense +2, stamina recovery +1%. Full durability and a boost was a boost, so I stripped off my novice pants, tossed them onto the farming tools, and pulled the cotton ones on. Before heading out, I checked my slots. 7 of 10 filled, which meant the next find would max me out, so I set the 2 blueprints by the bed and kept only the felling axe in hand. Taking out the seeds risked complications. The manual had to ride along always, water tended to stack when chests gave more, and wood stacked the moment I cut trees, so packing this way kept room free. My goal for the day was simple: gather enough material to build the wooden house one way or another. The weather was beautiful, warm sun on the hillside loosening my mood as I walked up to a level 1 poplar and lined up the axe for the angle that would cost the least durability. The first swing cut clean through about a third of the trunk, far better aim than yesterday, and my strength felt a notch higher too, so I swung the other side and carved a second deep notch. With both sides bitten in, I put the axe away, gripped the tree with both hands and shook it back and forth the way someone in the morning chat had described. It would eat stamina and I wasn't certain it would work, but a logging axe ran several hundred survival points at auction, some listings already up to 995, and stamina was at least cheap to recover. The poplar wasn't large, and after a few shakes the trunk cracked and gave, so I pressed down and let go fast, the panel handing me 2 level 1 wood and white and 31 gray firewood. That cost 2 points of axe durability and 6 of stamina, and with a 70-point pool I didn't bother resting, just shook out my arms and moved on. By 10:30 I lay down to rest, having been out nearly 2 hours and found only one chest, which held a couple portions of water, a couple loaves of bread, and 5 pieces of level 1 wood. Once my stamina climbed back to 60, I worked toward a lower stretch, chopping any tree that looked easy to fell. Near noon, with my axe almost gone, I caught sight of something new in the woods. Water. West of home, 600 or 700 meters out. Only a thin trickle threading along the cracks in the crushed stone, but it was water. I followed the flow uphill more than 100 meters and found a tall rock split clean down the middle, water seeping from the seam. A real water source. I circled it to make sure nothing was lurking, then hurried home, grabbed my 2 buckets and ran back with my hoe. I dug at the little pool below the crevice, prying out the big stones and shoving the small ones aside until I'd opened a puddle barely larger than a bucket, then waited for the churned water to settle, which it did in under 10 minutes with the spring feeding it steadily. I'd forgotten to bring anything to scoop with, so I crouched on the crushed stone and filled the buckets by cupping water in both hands, cursing the iron pot back home. That would have been perfect for this. The puddle was small, so each bucket took a while, and even careful I let some mud slip in, then stored both in separate slots. Back at my doorstep by 12:30, I figured I'd water the crops even though the field showed no shortage, since the water was free anyway. I poured a little beside the level 0 seedlings, and a prompt floated up reading double growth speed, watered with spring water, effect lasting just under an hour. So even with no shortage showing, watering still mattered since spring water flat out doubled their growth. I went back for the planting hoe, dug small pits around each crop, and this time used the iron pot as my scoop, pouring water into every pit until the acceleration prompt appeared. Both buckets ran dry with only half the field watered, so I trekked back to the spring for more, and by the time I'd finished the second half it was already 1 in the afternoon. I sat on the grass gnawing a hard loaf of bread, looking out at the whole field now glowing with the accelerated growth prompt. Planting only paid out in mission rewards, but watching the seeds sprout and climb was its own small pleasure. Chewing the bread, I brushed the leaves of the level 1 cucumber, planted only yesterday afternoon. A 5-day crop already shot up past 1/2 meter. The trouble was cucumbers want a trellis to climb, and I had no materials to rig one. So I searched the auction for farming items, and after just a day there were plenty. Player-crafted racks and stands, many at starting bids of 0, since the mall didn't carry them. A level 1 flower stand at 88 survival points. A vegetable rack at 46. The prices ran high though, and I gave up after browsing, since the cucumber wasn't flashing any growth warning yet, and with under 300 survival points I couldn't stomach dropping 100 or 2 on a single rack. After resting, I ran back for 2 more buckets and tried watering again, but the crops I'd already done no longer took the acceleration, so I couldn't tell whether the limit was 1 watering a day. I stored the full buckets and changed direction to keep hunting chests. A few hundred meters along I opened one under a tree for a level 1 cotton top in white, 15 pieces of level 1 wood, and 3 level 1 sunflower seeds. Good luck, real finds. The cotton top rated white quality, comfort +5, defense +3, stamina recovery +1.5%, energy recovery +1%, full durability, so I stripped off my starter top and pulled on the cotton one, a soft thing with a diagonal lapel, wide sleeves and fabric ties inside and out. Then I rolled up the discarded starter top and cinched it around the outside as a belt. No attributes to it, just something to keep the loose garment closed. I kept chopping until the felling axe hit 0 durability and the whole thing vanished, leaving me 168 level 1 wood, 32 short of the 200 I needed. It was already past 3:30 with a little over 2 hours until dark, and rounding out the count by chest alone would be tough. But it was a hope worth running on. My luck had dried up though, circle after circle turning up nothing. By 5 I looked back toward the peak, the area I'd covered wide enough that a straight walk home would run 20 minutes, less at a run. I told myself I'd search 10 more minutes and then go home regardless, since I've never liked cutting things to the wire. I walked straight down slope a bit, and 4 or 5 minutes in I stopped cold, because there was a treasure chest, and it was a level 2 wild chest, the better grade, sitting under a big pine. I couldn't manage even a flicker of a smile, because coiled around that pine in loop after loop was a black snake whose length I couldn't begin to guess, its body maybe 30 centimeters thick or more. The panel labeled it a level 3 red-scaled python, its combat power unreadable, the gap between us too large for me to see anything beyond its level and name. Frozen where I stood, the one thought that surfaced through my fear was that the thing was plainly black, so why on earth was it named red? And then even that absurd flicker burned away as terror spread through me. I was an ordinary person with no special ability, and last night's enhancement had bumped my combat power, but it still read only 6. The snake was looking at me now, head raised, locked on, and everything, the panel's warning and the sheer size of it, told me that having walked all the way here, I was not getting away. The red-scaled python had seen me for certain. Its head rose and its body shifted on the trunk, scales grinding against the pine branches and bark crushing apart wherever it moved. Just as its head reached the ground, a dull bird cry dropped out of the sky, and a huge dark shadow flashed across my vision in a single instant. The next moment there was only the shattered pine, its trunk and branches crushed, and that level 2 chest sitting clean and far finer than any level 1 I'd opened. The snake was simply gone, plucked away, and only then did I get my body back, my legs buckling so fast I dropped straight to the ground. I pushed up on both hands and gasped for air. My panel reads Spirit 2 out of 50, Stamina 3 out of 70, Combat Power 6. Both pools crashed to the floor just from being locked onto, my body freezing on its own with no save from me. I'd seen no wild creature in a day and a half, and smugly called it newbie protection, and now a level 3 python had nearly killed me by doing nothing but noticing I existed. 29 hours into this world, I finally understood why they called it a survival game, a narrow escape and a level 2 chest waiting at the end of it. After 2 minutes on my back, I crawled to the chest on all fours, my breathing as raspy as if I'd gone days without water, and forced the lid open. It gave me 5 kinds of loot, a concentration cultivation technique, a level 1 pet egg, an inventory expansion voucher worth 5 slots, a level 1 snake bone chain in blue quality, and 200 survival points. The points credited at once, I used the expansion voucher on the spot, and the egg and chain floated into my slots in their air bubbles. Then I just needed to get home. No strength left and my head scraped hollow, but I had to reach that ruined cottage before dark. I still had bread and water, so I ate and drank as I walked, gulping all I could since each cup bought a few minutes of faster recovery. Even sped up, it was painfully slow, but I didn't dare stop, and the ground stayed mostly flat with no other wild creatures showing. By the time the peak came into view, my stamina had bled to a single point, so I watched the clock and hauled myself upward with my hands gripping the dirt. At 3 minutes before 6, I reached the top, rolled to my doorstep, touched the house, and dragged myself inside on stiff limbs. I lay on the floor with both spirit and stamina at 1, and managed a couple of weak laughs before the coughing took over. When it eased, I turned my head and looked at the wall with almost no cover to it, and right as the clock struck 6, the still bright world went black in a single blink, a switch thrown the same way it had snapped to light that morning. The campfire lit the inside of the house, and feeling that warmth, I fed every last one of the 1,000+ pieces of firewood into it. I owed yesterday's self for gritting through the pain of that enhancement, since without the extra stamina I never would have crawled home at all. Those last stretches of crawling had wrecked my gear, the pants down to 38% durability and the top to 53, my arms striped with scratches from the road, my fingers and palms scraped raw with blood and mud under my nails. It hurt, and the more my hands throbbed, the more my mouth kept twitching toward a smile, because it hurt for the simple reason that I was still alive. I'd made it back. For the first time, I understood how stubborn I actually was about living. After resting, I pulled up the concentration cultivation technique, a manual that once learned let me strengthen my spirit limit through practice, an item with no quality grade at all, the sort you rarely saw at auction. I told it to learn, and manuals learn directly, the technique vanishing from my slots as a stream of knowledge poured straight into my mind. The method was simple, just settling the mind and concentrating, doable even lying down, and I complained inwardly that practicing flat on my back might backfire by putting me to sleep. Exhausted to the limit, I couldn't even say how I finished the attempt, because exactly as I'd predicted, I drifted off partway through. I opened my eyes again to blue sky and white clouds, and a few seconds of pure confusion. I was lying on the ground, the campfire beside me still burning, and the manual told me it was survival game day 3, daytime 8 to 6, weather clear, temperature 20 to 28 degrees, wind level 1, the current time already passed, 11:40 in the morning. So I'd slept nearly 18 hours. I really could sleep. But sleep let the body recover in this game mode world, and the numb, raw aches from yesterday were basically gone. I sat up before the fire, took out my survival manual, and checked today's daily mission, which wanted me to reclaim land for planting, progress 0 out of 10, for 10 survival points in a planting gift pack. Farming missions seemed to be nothing but planting, and 10 was easy. The smaller the quota, the fewer the survival points, naturally, so there was no rush, and I'd head out shortly. I pulled bread and water to fill my stomach and opened my player information. My energy now reads 73 out of 76, my stamina 70 out of 70, combat power up to 7, my plant modification technique at level 1, with the concentration cultivation technique beneath it. My equipment showed novice cloth shoes set to vanish in 3 days, the level 1 cotton trousers at 37%, the cotton shirt at 51. My assets were the thatched hut and the 50 square meter field, my survival points 478.3, my inventory at 7 of 15 now. Holding the manual, 40 random seeds, 1 water, 168 level 1 wood, 3 level 1 sunflower seeds, the pet egg, and the snakebone chain. My maximum energy had climbed 26 points after one night's sleep, and though it wasn't fully topped off, that did nothing to dent my mood. I noticed the chain read level 1, blue quality, which made me wonder whether level and quality were tracked separately. I'd always assumed level 1 meant white, since level 0 items came up gray, but now it was clear that level was level and quality was quality. Two different tags. The level 1 snake bone chain rated blue quality, an accessory with a 3-piece activation limit, granting max energy plus 10 and energy recovery plus 3% at full durability. The chain looked exactly like its name, a string of bone-like links that twisted freely, a meter long and a centimeter across, so I wound it around my neck and confirmed yes when it asked whether to activate. Accessories didn't take effect just from being worn the way clothes did. They had to be manually activated, and only 3 could run at once, removable anytime with an extra step. That handed me a whole tactical idea, since with enough accessories I could wear a stack and switch on whichever boost the situation called for. I admitted I was getting ahead of myself, switching to chat while I ate and pulling out the pet egg for a look. A pet egg was genuinely just an egg, a white-shelled sphere the size of a basketball, marked hatchable and random, the auction showing several level 1 eggs with the identical tag. Out here in the empty wilderness, a pet would at least make things livelier, so I hoped whatever I got wouldn't be too rowdy and tapped hatch, expecting a long process. Instead, a countdown ran from 10, and 10 seconds later the panel announced a successful hatch, a level 1 pet, a snake. I'd nearly died under a snake suppression a day ago, and now I'd hatched one, which left my mood somewhere complicated. Having a pet was good, but a snake, after the chain and the python and the near-death and everything in that level 2 chest all turning out snake-related, was a lot of snake for one stretch of days. Still, I'd hatched it myself, so I couldn't very well hold its species against it. I raised my hand, looked at the little thing cold in my palm, and felt my heart settle, because it was mine, and what else would I do but raise it? The panel listed it as a snake, level 1, growing on its own or through special food, combat power 2, healthy, attribute space, skill undeveloped. It had pure white scales and red eyes, no bigger than a chopstick, and a combat power of 2 was nothing but that attribute tag was excellent. The skill would come later, yet no matter how a space attribute unfolded, it felt like infinite potential. The little white snake coiled around my finger, too freshly hatched to make a sound, just learning my scent. I wondered what something that small even ate, since its information showed no hunger meter, so I tipped my water cup to drop a tiny bead into my palm. The little white snake brought its head near, looked up at me as if thinking it over, and after a few seconds dipped down and drank. I poured a bit more and watched it drink again, and when a little was left I crumbled some bread into it. Recognizing food, the little white snake swallowed the crumbs, then reared up a section of its body and swayed left and right at me. It didn't like that, clearly. I pressed a finger to its head and laughed, since feeding a newborn snake hard breadcrumbs was admittedly asking a lot. It would have to do, since I had nothing else edible in the house, and I'd wait until the little one got hungry again. With my own stomach barely filled, I needed to finish today's mission first, then head out again to hunt treasure chests and gather materials. Stepping out the door, I caught a fresh tad floating over my field, telling me the level 0 cabbage had hit its harvest window and would start rotting in 48 hours if I left it. The thing only needed 2 days to mature, and one watering yesterday to push its growth along had been enough to finish it. I walked over to a head of cabbage standing more than 30 centimeters tall, and pulled it straight out of the ground, and the panel pinged twice as a second one came up with it, both now reading as a vegetable, craftable and edible. I'd just eaten bread, bad as it was, so I had no intention of gnawing raw on a 4 or 5 pound cabbage. One chive plant had also gone harvestable, but that one needed the sickle, since it would keep regrowing after I cut it. I held the cut bunch of chives up near my neck and asked the little white snake whether it wanted any. The bunch a touch bigger than its whole body, but it ignored them completely and stayed asleep against my collar. So much for teasing it. I tucked the chives away, picked up the reclamation hoe, and went back to breaking new ground, adding maybe 2 square meters after a few minutes of digging. Then turned the soil in the 2 spots where I'd pulled the cabbages and got ready to plant again. I put the 3 sunflowers in first, since they counted toward the task even if they weren't exactly food. After that, I cracked open the random seeds I'd been carrying, checked each one and planted them down. 7 this round, all level 0. The panel confirmed my daily mission complete, 10 reclamations out of 10, and handed me 10 survival points along with a planting gift pack. I opened the pack on the spot and got a single unit of level 1 fertilizer, which the system told me could go on any level 1 or lower crop to double its growth speed for an hour. Useful, but nothing I'd planted needed it yet, so I carried it inside and found a corner to store it. It was already past noon, and the old wisdom said never water at midday, but everything here ran on numbers now, so I didn't bother worrying about it. With my stamina full again, I loaded both buckets and the iron pot into my inventory and jogged out to the mountain spring. The moment we reached the edge of the water, the little white snake shook its head, slid off my arm on its own, and dropped straight into the puddle to play. I nudged it toward the side so it wouldn't get in the way, and kept scooping water with the iron pot, and then, without warning, it shot out of the puddle and went streaking off through the dead grass before I could catch it. I dumped the half-filled bucket and the iron pot back into my inventory and took off after it. The snake was small and its combat power was nothing, but across open grass it moved fast enough that I had to keep breaking into a run to stay with it. After more than 3 minutes heading in one direction, it finally stopped, and the grin on my face widened because there in front of it sat a level 1 wilderness treasure chest, half buried in the mud. Could this little fellow actually find treasure? I thanked it for the hard work, held out my wrist for it to coil around, and opened the chest, which dropped 2 white level 1 eggs, 10 units of white level 1 wood, and a loaf of bread straight into my inventory. I pulled out 1 egg to check it, just an ingredient, craftable and edible the same as its twin, and right about then I figured out why the snake had bolted over here. It probably hadn't been hunting a treasure chest at all, just the food inside one. I cracked a small hole in the shell, told it to go ahead and eat its fill, and I'd save the other for later, and held the egg out flat. The little white snake tilted its head, as if double-checking, then crawled bodily into the eggshell and cleaned out the white and yolk in seconds before slithering back up to my wrist. Quiet again, full and content. The empty shell turned out to read gray quality, usable as fertilizer or as crafting stock for level 0 medicine. The level 0 things couldn't be traded, so it was burial in the dirt fertilizer and nothing more. I pocketed the shell, went back to the puddle, filled both buckets and headed home to water everything for the speed boost. When the buckets ran dry, I went back for more, and with 67 crops in the field now, it took 3 round trips to soak them all. We kept hunting supply boxes after that, and I talked at the snake one-sidedly, telling it tomorrow was the 3rd day and that if I didn't turn up shoes, things were going to get miserable. It was asleep, naturally, but having a living thing of my own riding along still made the wilderness feel less empty. I bent today's route a little off yesterday's, and on a gravel slope east of the house I spotted another level 1 chest, my luck holding, no equipment but 2 more level 1 cotton seeds, 15 units of white level 1 wood, and 2 cups of drinking water. The wood alone made the day, putting me at 193 units against the 200 I needed for the upgrade. Only 7 short. 7 units of wood short hardly mattered now. The mall sold wood at 20 survival points a unit, but the auction and player consignments ran a bit cheaper, so if nothing turned up by nightfall I could just buy the rest. Feeling settled about the house materials, I kept up my circling in a good mood, and grabbed loose firewood along the way to keep the campfire going longer. I knew it only mattered at night, but I didn't want it to go out. Until I had something better, the burning campfire was the thing that let me believe the house was safe. The chat channel filled up with talk about player classes while I walked, hundreds of words at a stretch from one player summarizing what people had figured out, with others chiming in from their own corners. Chatting cost survival points, but plenty of folks didn't mind spending a few a day to trade information. From what they laid out, hunting players got level 0 animals spawning near their homes, wild chickens and rabbits and snakes and rats and bugs, easy enough to catch, with the rare level 1 showing up on good luck. Higher level wilderness animals refreshed farther out and wouldn't approach a player's house as long as nobody attacked them first, which most people chalked up to the novice protection period, though a few loudmouths swore they were out there casually slaughtering dragons and phoenixes. Beyond that, the real talk was about drops. Level 1 animals had a shot at dropping level 1 materials, all exchangeable for survival points, while level 0 ones left only carcasses the player had to process by hand, with nobody claiming to have finished a batch of compost yet. Hunting was the most crowded class, gathering the next, working much the same way with resources refreshing near home, mostly level 0 with the occasional level 1. Farming players were thin on the ground, and the few who surfaced described exactly my own days, and a couple who could accelerate crop growth mentioned that harvesting level 1 crops sometimes dropped replantable seeds alongside the tradable materials. Breeding sounded worse than planting, the players posting weary complaints about how the class ate resources, how they rushed out at first light hunting chests, and how any young animal they pulled often had to be sold off just to feed the ones already growing. They cheered up once the crafting players showed up to wallow, because where every other class let level 0 count toward tasks, crafting could only work level 1 materials and up. Their daily missions burned level 1 stock. What they made had only a sliver of a chance to upgrade in quality, and white-grade goods already sat cheap in the mall, which let them measure their losses exactly, a quarter of the raw value gone on white semi-finished goods, and a third on white finished ones. Consignment only let them list one item at a time with no guarantee of a sale, and the auction took anything but skimmed 10% off the top. All that math only described the people pulling white quality though, since anyone whose craft turned out green or blue or better was raking in profit on profit. I figured there were definitely people winning, watching the channel and doing my own quiet sums as I searched the slope. If you landed a skill first and then picked a class, you'd obviously pick one that played to the skill. Losses were natural, but not everyone was bleeding survival points. It was just that the ones turning a profit kept their mouths shut, and the few who bragged got called liars anyway. A while later, I found another treasure chest, and my luck stayed warm, because it opened straight into an axe, plus 2 white level 1 weed seeds and a portion of drinking water. Axe in hand, I tracked down a level 1 tree and started cutting, chopping diagonally on both sides, then gripping above the notch and hauling in one direction until it cracked through and came down. 3 trees in a row gave me enough wood to finally upgrade the hut, so I told the snake we were heading home and I'd think about everything else once the house was done. This little fellow slept like a champion, never stirring once even while I shook a tree trunk hard enough to drop it. I'd looped all over hunting chests, but home was a straight shot, so I made it back fast. The crops had grown a hair, nothing dramatic, and I gave my battered shack one last look before opening the operation interface and clicking into assets. Everything had come together. The blueprint at 1 out of 1, and my wood at 202, against the required 200, so I just hit upgrade and the system did the rest. The notice came back that the level 1 wooden hut was complete. 3 meters by 5, defense 10, durability 1000. I opened the door in a great mood and walked inside. From outside it looked like debarked round logs stacked into pillars, but inside the walls were fairly flat, as if the logs had been split down the middle and pieced together. 15 square meters now, the floor still hard-packed dirt and gravel. The campfire still burning, the walls risen 2.5 meters with beams laid across the top to hold an A-frame roof. 2 simple wooden windows had been cut into the front wall, just openings with loose blocks you slotted back in to close them. The thing that struck me was that they were real windows, where the old shack had looked open-walled but kept an invisible barrier I couldn't push my hand through. These I could reach through or even crawl out of, so I tested them, slotted the wood back, and left them shut. I decided it was not bad, a little more security at last, now that I would not have to face the night with nothing between me and it. I fed all the firewood from my inventory into the campfire, watched its burn time climb to 49 hours, set my things down and went back out. The second I crossed the threshold, the little white snake woke up, head swinging left and right before it slid down my arm toward the ground. When my hand got close enough, it touched the dirt and slipped into the field, and I went to the edge to check the crop tags. Sure, it wasn't just wandering. One tag flagged a bud, a tomato plant, and after staring at the leaves, I found a green caterpillar about 2 centimeters long curled under one of them. The little white snake climbed up the tomato stem, found the caterpillar, opened its mouth, and swallowed it whole, and the panel rewarded the kill with a 30-minute growth boost on that plant. I crouched and waited with my hand out as the snake came back down, and sure enough it slithered straight up my arm and coiled at my wrist again. A snake that found treasure chests, maybe just hunting eggs, and ate crop pests, maybe just hungry, with no tags claiming any of it. I glanced at it on my wrist a few times while I headed back out to chop more trees and hunt more boxes, turning the little mystery over. Over the rest of the afternoon, I circled out a few more times, and only turned up one chest, the rest of my hours and stamina, going to felling trees. By 5:30, I was back at my door, sitting on the open ground to rest, with tomorrow at noon marking 3 full days in the game and the newbie stage likely ending soon. The chat channel ran busier than before that afternoon, players moving past class talk into theories about the survival game itself. From the start until now, 2 full days and an afternoon, 188 players out of 100,000 to a subzone had already died. Some called that a small number, others snapped back that this was still the protected newbie period, and a few circled around to the entry warning that the dead just got converted into other identities anyway. Shoes though, I still hadn't found any shoes. I stared at my plants a while, sighing over the missing shoes, then opened the auction to hunt for level 1 footwear. Level 1 cotton shoes started at 50 survival points there, which told me the mall price was 500, and the ones with little time left had already been bid up to 493. With 488.3 to my name, I couldn't outbid that without selling something, so I switched to the exchange instead. On the exchange, the same level 1 cotton shoes listed at 491, and that stopped me. Someone would bid 493 at auction, but wouldn't come by the identical pair here for 491. I looked back and forth between the two and found no difference in attributes at all. Every level 1 cotton shoe sharing the same stats at 100% brand new durability. I didn't get it, but I needed shoes, so I decided to sell a unit of wood to cover the gap. At auction, 1 unit of wood could be bid up to 19 survival points, and after the 10% fee that left me 17.1, enough for a pair of shoes, so I listed a unit with a 30-minute timer. Then I opened the wooden door and stepped back inside. A few minutes before dark, the door shut, the windows closed, nothing in the house but the warm light of the fire. "This is our home," I told the snake as I set it down. It could roam the floor all it liked, but it was not to crawl into the campfire. And then I started sorting my things and getting ready for dinner. Dinner was still cold, hard bread sighing over the lack of salt, though a chive and some cabbage on the side made it a step better than before. Without salt, I didn't bother cutting the cabbage, just peeled the leaves off, tore them up, and ate. The level 0 cabbage all water and faint sweetness, 5 leaves and 1 chive and the bread in a cup of water. By the time I finished, the wood I'd listed had sold, and I pulled back 17.1 survival points, which pushed my total just over 500. With more than 500 points, I checked them all first, scrolling past level 1 seeds, young animals, and level 1 white quality materials. In the equipment tab, there were only level 1 white quality tops, pants, and shoes, all flat at 500, plus a stretch of furniture, wooden beds and a stove and pots and grills and campfire stands and lanterns and tables and stools and chairs. All level 1 white quality, all 500. Nothing was more urgent than shoes, so I flipped to the exchange, compared it against the auction, and bought a pair of level 1 cotton shoes for 490 from a player consignment. The auction always seemed to climb to 492 or 3, but the exchange price had slipped a touch since I'd last looked. The shoes read as white quality equipment, comfort +5, defense +2, stamina recovery +1%. White quality equipment all carried roughly the same stats. I pulled off my attributeless novice shoes and put the new ones on to test them, and even though they looked far too big in my hands, they shrank to fit perfectly the moment they were on. I wondered whether that counted as the shoes changing with the feet, taking a few steps across the dirt and admitting these were genuinely good shoes. With footwear sorted, I had nothing left to fret over, and the chat channel only got livelier. But with 15.4 survival points to my name, I had zero intention of paying to talk. Night had fallen long ago outside, and I started tidying my tools in the larger house. The reclamation hoe still held 73% durability, the planting hoe 97, the harvesting sickle 100, the buckets 71 and 75, the dustpan 100, the level 1 flower pot a fresh unused 100, and the iron pot dropped to 65. Wearing down fastest because it kept knocking against the rocks in that cramped little puddle. I set those aside and went through the rest. A bag of fertilizer, a matchbox at 8 of 10 uses, and the cabbage, large and small. Then my inventory itself, 7 of 15 slots, holding the survival manual, random seeds, 2 portions of drinking water, 1 level 1 white egg, 185 units of white level 1 wood, 2 white level 1 cotton seeds, and 2 white level 1 cotton seeds. Beyond the sorted gear, there was also the replaced novice 3-piece set, the damaged single bed with 2 uses left, the wooden pillow, and the grass mat on top. I reached out to stop the snake circling the wall and told the little fellow I would give it a name. It twined around my hand and I carried it back, sat down and chewed it over, since I'd just eaten my fill and felt like resting anyway. The snake looped back and forth across my open palm, the gaps between my fingers wide enough for it to play happily, and when I spoke it raised its head to look around, even though it couldn't understand a word. Little White or Little Snake both felt too blunt, and then, watching it wind between my fingers into the curved line of a crescent, I told it that from now on its name would be Crescent Moon. Just like that. Decided. The newly named Crescent Moon kept winding through my hands, pausing now and then to look up at me and flick its red tongue to act cute. You play slow, I told it. I've got cultivation to do, and I'll aim to hit the 100 energy cap by the time I wake so I can finally start adding mutations to our family's crops. I looked at the campfire, hesitated, then chose to lie on the bed to meditate and rest, not knowing exactly when I'd drop off, since this concentrated meditation cultivation basically just put me to sleep every time. Lying flat with both hands on my body, I let my breathing slow alongside the practice, while Crescent Moon played on, and when it tired out it came to my neck, twined around the chain and fell asleep too. In the dead of night, Crescent Moon jerked awake out of a sound sleep, lifting a small length of its body and tilting toward the east wall of the house, because outside that wall there was something. After a frozen few seconds, it turned to look at me, still sleeping soundly, tilted its head a couple of times, then shrank back and went on sleeping, since it was safe in here and whatever lurked outside couldn't get in. One person and one snake slept through it, but a great battle was unfolding on the east face of the mountain. A large bird with faint blue light flickering across its feathers wheeled in the air, swooping now and then to rake its claws across the scales of the red great snake. The red great snake on the ground, goaded by the scratching, whipped its tail around in chaos and twisted its head angle after angle, hungry to swallow the bird harassing it. The air-to-ground fight dragged on, each draining the other's stamina, each guarding against ambush, until the snake's strikes slowed and the bird's dives lost their old precision. The bird went for one more sneak pass, dropping it along the line that dodged the tail, but the snake had been faking exhaustion the whole time. It rolled over and surged in fast, jaws snapping shut on the bird's body, and as the venom took hold the bird stiffened, pinned to the ground while the tail came smashing down on its head again and again. The fight ended there. After finally poisoning and battering the bird to death, the snake paused to make sure it would never move again, then opened its jaws and swallowed it whole. With the ambusher gone, the red great snake climbed the slope and circled my little wooden house a few times, even easing in closer to study the small messy field, before turning west with a look of plain disdain. To the west, near the mountaintop, lay a mountain spring, and the snake had only come down out of the nearby peaks tonight to find that water and drink. Waking past 6 the next day, I reached for the chain at my neck and smiled when I touched the snake, wishing Crescent Moon good morning. I'd slept comfortably, though now I was even more curious whether I'd actually meditated through the night, or just slept, and the answer came when I opened my player information. My energy now read 115 out of 105, with another 10 from equipment on top. My stamina 70 of 70, my combat power 8. The energy cap had jumped 29 points, more than enough to use my skill. The value only seemed to count whole numbers, and the equipment bonus apparently wasn't folded into the cap. But however the system did the math, I was just glad it had gone up. Crescent Moon had been awake a while, too lazy to move, and now that I was off the bed it slid down my sleeve into my hand, hungry and wanting an egg. I pulled the egg from my inventory, pried open a small hole, and let it eat, its tail wrapping my finger and tapping a few times while it drank the egg liquid down. Then it hauled its head out, coiled at my wrist, and went still, full and ready to rest. "You're full, so I'd better eat too," I told it, and walked to the campfire to grab the half loaf of bread left from yesterday. I was out of cabbage, so I opened the exchange to check prices, then the auction, and listed a unit of wood at 18 survival points on the exchange side. The day before I'd complained about people refusing to buy shoes off the exchange, and here I was doing the same thing, listing wood on the auction for 17.1 after the fee, when the exchange would have given me a clean 18. This time, listed at 18 on the exchange, it sold in under 5 minutes, since the exchange took no cut, only a cap on how many items you could list. With 18 survival points in hand, I searched both markets for cabbage, finding it on the exchange at 10, the same as the mall, and on the auction bid up to 9, with no point in raising it to 10. No cheap ones anywhere, so I just bought one straight from the mall, eating bread in one hand and cabbage in the other. I scrolled up the chat channel and there was that familiar number again. A player asking whether everyone had slept well and confessing the thunder at his place had scared the life out of him. This one was always active, always posting at least 10 characters where most players managed a few, and people had started joking that maybe his skill was free chat channel access. The rest of the feed rolled past, a player reporting a fire burning toward his house, another saying a huge head was pressed against his chat channel before he'd even upgraded his hut, someone telling him to save up and buy survival points for a new house. A player advertised a level 1 green quality fence on the exchange, trading only for level 1 wood. Another hawked a level 1 blue quality weapon on the exchange for level 1 iron ore. Then one message stopped me. A player asking whether Lee Don from District H Province C was around. Signed Lee Myung. Another player cut in that families were probably just in different zones, while others griped about pets that wouldn't eat and weapons for sale. I saw that someone had started selling level 1 blue quality weapons and switched to the sales tab to look. The iron bow listed as blue quality weapon type equipment. Limit 1 weapon, strength +3, accuracy +1, durability 100%. The seller's piece might not be this exact one, since there were plenty of blue quality weapons going around, none of them cheap, all trading for various materials. Converted to survival points, a level 1 blue quality weapon ran at least 8,000, while an ordinary level 1 white quality weapon cost 650. It was not too outrageous really, when every zone shared one trading interface, and there was no telling how many players were out there. Gnawing a cabbage leaf, I sighed at the extravagance. Though I wasn't doing badly myself, earning less but already holding a piece of level 1 blue quality equipment, and jewelry at that, which ran pricier than weapons. Full now and ready to rest a while, I sat on the ground and stared blankly at the chat channel, because it wasn't daylight yet and I couldn't leave the house. The system told me it was survival game day 4, daytime hours 8 to 6, weather clear, temperature 23 to 32, wind level 4, the current time just past 7:11 in the morning. Today's mission wanted me to clear land for planting. Progress 0 out of 50, for 50 survival points and a planting gift pack. Clear weather, a peak past 30 degrees, and a planting task demanding 50 plants, while the seeds in my inventory weren't enough, and my level 1 crops weren't ready to harvest yet. It looked like I'd have to open chests, or sell wood and buy seeds, and just hope I could finish the thing. It's dawn, time to head out and work, I told myself at 8, standing up off the floor and opening the door. The sun was already up outside, warm light spilling across the crops in front of the house. The spread of color and brightness genuinely refreshing. Plenty were nearly ready to harvest, so I figured I'd fetch water first, and take the reclamation hoe to dig the puddle bigger while I was at it, since with more crops coming, that little puddle held too little. I raised my hand to check the quiet snake, ducked back inside for a bucket, and watered the edge plants first, not forgetting to load the iron pot and reclamation hoe into my inventory, before both buckets ran empty, and I jogged west toward the mountain spring. My energy and stamina were both full, so I could have used my skill right away, but watering once a day was a necessity, and I wanted to spend some stamina first, so that after the skill I could rest and recover both at once. It was great luck, because a few hundred meters out, I spotted a level 1 wilderness treasure chest at the bottom of a slope, walked over, and opened it for 6 units of white level 1 stone, 3 white level 1 carrot seeds, and a loaf of bread. The first chest of the day with level 1 seeds put me in a fine mood, and the stone was a bonus, 2.5 times the value of wood even if it came in far smaller amounts. The items dropped into my inventory, and I gave them one glance before continuing toward the mountain spring. When the stone wall of the mountain spring came into view, my feet stopped, because something was wrong ahead. The spring had always been water seeping from a single crack in the stone, with maybe an intermittent surface flow. Never anything like this. I couldn't see it yet, but I could hear water rushing hard against rock. Crescent Moon tilted its head, and ahead lay an aura left by one of its own kind, an aura that read somehow irritable. I murmured that it should be fine and that we would look from the side first, stroking the snake which I assumed was just urging me on because I'd halted. I worked downhill before approaching, and after a few dozen meters, the spring came into view in its new state. The single vertical crack had become a spreading web of fractures running every direction, and though the wall hadn't shattered, water now poured from nearly every line of it into a puddle big enough to bathe in, where before I'd had to tip the iron pot just to scoop a little. The bottom looked clean, gravel and sand pushed out from below, as if something had stirred it up, and the stronger flow had washed a shallow stream half a meter wide out past the overflow. Crescent moon slid off my wrist and dropped straight into the puddle, swimming happy loops, free now to play without smacking into rocks the way it couldn't yesterday. "You really love water," I told it. "If I couldn't see your attributes, I'd half believe you were a water snake." The snake's reaction told me there was no immediate danger, so I knelt and filled the buckets directly. No iron pot needed, just dunking each one and lifting it out full into my inventory. But Crescent Moon was having too much fun to come out, ignoring my hand on the water even with home so close, and the thought of a bird passing over while it played alone left me uneasy. It finally caught my meaning, darted out and wrapped my finger again, clearly sure it could have stayed in longer. "We'll come back soon," I said as I walked. "Our crops are thirstier now, partly because they've grown up, which is naturally different from when they were seedlings." Back at the door I watered the roots with both buckets, then went for more, and each trip Crescent Moon swam a few laps and returned when I touched the surface. 9 round trips later I'd watered the whole field, 2 full buckets still in my inventory, my stamina down to 43 even with some natural recovery. Now for something important. I told Crescent Moon to stay put and not come down, pressing it onto my necklace, since I wasn't sure what would change in a moment. For my first use of the skill, I picked the very first level 1 cucumber I'd planted, set down on the afternoon of day 1, still showing a 48-hour countdown despite the daily hour of acceleration. I sat on the wasteland beside it, stretched both hands toward its roots, and silently triggered plant modification. My energy dropped 100 points in an instant, a green light flaring in my left palm nearest the roots, and the panel told me the level 1 cucumber had gained the modification effect yield plus 50%, with the modification limit for this stage now reached, and no further changes possible. Drained on the spot, I looked at the result and smiled, since a yield boost was solid and no negative effect had shown up, which left me satisfied. My skill listed unknown effects, after all, and that had been quietly worrying me. Crescent Moon shook its head at its master gone suddenly weak, looked back at the cucumber, saw nothing changed, glanced around a few more times, then stopped worrying, apparently deciding I was just happy. I needed to rest, certain now that what I needed most was a better bed, and I carried Crescent Moon inside to lie on the ground, since a bed would be more comfortable except mine had a single use of durability left. Unlike gear that wore down with use, the bed counted lying down times, so the next time I got off it the thing would hit 0 and vanish, which meant the floor it was. I meditated for recovery, lost track of time as the cultivation state took me, and when I climbed back up it was 11 in the morning. My energy fully restored and my maximum risen another 6 points. My cap stood at 111 now, 121 with the necklace, and my stamina had topped off long ago, so I went out and started clearing wasteland piece by piece. I was getting better at reclamation, maybe helped along by the rise in combat power, and I kept digging beside my old fields until I had 80 square meters of planting field, then stopped. The soil came up clean and soft, and I pulled seeds from my inventory, planting the level 1 ones first, then opening the random seeds and setting them down one by one before watering everything. The mission panel updated to 44 of 50, still 6 plantings short. On day 1, I'd planted 10 and harvested 2 cabbages and cut 1 chive, which kept regrowing. On day 2, 50, on day 3, 10, and today already 44, leaving 112 crops total in the field. I went down the rows, counting 18 level 1 crops, 5 cucumbers, 4 carrots, 3 wheat, 3 sunflowers, 2 cotton, and 1 tomato. The level 0 crops ran to too many kinds, chives and eggplants and chili peppers and potatoes and cabbages and oilseed rape and sweet potatoes and peanuts and soybeans and red beans and mung beans among them. 94 plants in all, several the sort you could harvest 3 to 9 times. For now I cared most about the level 1 crops, since the farming players kept saying only level 1 produced tradable materials and seeds, while level 0 output was strictly for eating or feeding animals, even if it still counted toward the missions. I told Crescent Moon we would keep hunting chests, or even eating would become a problem. After one last look at the field I set out with 2 buckets, hit the mountain spring first to fill them, then let Crescent Moon play while I stripped off my equipment and bathed by the pool, geared back up and headed out to find new chests. I spotted a level 1 wilderness treasure chest perched on a bush about 10 minutes down the stream, and said we were in luck today with another one nearby. I threw a few stones into the bush to make sure nothing was moving, then reached in and opened it for 1 unit of white level 1 rabbit meat, a cup of drinking water, and a loaf of bread. Rabbit meat. And I pulled it out to check, a skinned rabbit with the bones still in, 3 or 4 pounds, craftable and edible. My snake didn't eat vegetables, so the meat could wait until home to be sliced and fed to it. Or I could put the iron pot on the campfire and cook it for myself, since meat was always a good thing. I stowed it and kept hunting, until it was nearing noon and a sudden unease turned me around to run home. reaching my front door at 5 to 12. This time I stood at the door waiting to see whether anything changed at noon, since the newbie protection ran 3 days and from my arrival at noon on day 1 it would be exactly 3 full days at 12 sharp. I opened the door, confirmed the 3 pieces of the novice set were still inside, carried them out, looked around and waited out the last minutes. 12 sharp arrived, and 3 notices popped in a row, telling me I'd survived 72 hours in the survival game. The newbie period was over, and I was entering survival phase 1, named No Zuo No Die. The phase came with rules. No active disasters, high-level wild creatures wouldn't attack a player's home without reason, and players had a chance to trigger random missions they could choose whether to accept. Looking at that name, I had the strange sense the game was just forcing players to keep choosing. First a class, now whether to take missions. If your luck ran bad, you might trigger no mission at all, and if you did, you'd have to weigh the benefits against the risk, since accepting could mean a life-threatening disaster while declining wasn't necessarily safe either. Right as I was thinking both paths might bite, a mission choice popped up, noting a mountain spring near my home had triggered a level 1 random mission, called Water Source Struggle, asking whether I'd accept. 1 hour to decide. The terms read that accepting meant facing attacks from level 1 to 2 wild creatures, defending against 10 attacks for a reward of 1,000 survival points and 1 random piece of level 1 equipment. Decline, I said flatly, and chose it on sight. My combat power had crept from 5 to 9, but I had no weapon and no attack skill, and 10 attacks from level 1 to 2 creatures was suicide, especially when a level 3 could nearly kill me with its aura alone. So decline? I didn't want the mission, and the moment I refused it vanished. Still, the mission had reminded me that the mountain spring west of my home could draw uncertain wild creatures at any time, and there wasn't much I could do about it. Thinking back to the changes in the puddle, I was now sure some unknown wild creature had already been there, deciding it was too small and widening the flow to deepen the basin. The chat channel turned over fresh waves about all this, that familiar active player envying the strong who could trigger quests, kill invading creatures, and rake in survival points and high-quality equipment and bonus drops. Another player with only 4 combat power complained that a quest notice had popped warning a level 2 wild creature had taken interest in him, which sounded like a death sentence. Someone asked whether he'd accepted it, and a third said a level 1 had nearly torn his house down, only leaving when the timer ran out, dragging every raised animal out of the fence and eating them. Everyone started at the same time. One player demanded, so why was the strength gap already this huge? Another called it unfair, said the strong would only get stronger, and the weak could only wait to die. And a colder voice answered that this was a survival game, that if nobody died there'd be no demand for mall slaves. The active player dropped fresh news, that planting and breeding had mutated and even doing construction in your homestead could trigger a random quest. And a wave of players posted nothing but the word reject in answer. The channel kept boiling while I circled the mountain hunting level 1 wilderness treasure chests, which refreshed daily from what people said. I squatted to set my hand down and see whether the snake had a direction in mind, asking Crescent Moon if it wanted to move around on the ground. It had no treasure hunting attribute, but it had found chests before, so it was worth a try. And maybe there'd be a box of food nearby. The snake reached the ground, froze, and looked back at me, too small to read clearly, but its dazed reaction still told me something. I told it to just take a walk, mimicking steps with 2 fingers beside it, and after tilting its head and shaking twice it lowered down and began slithering forward, swaying as it went. It moved a few meters, stopped, looked back, and once I followed it kept on. Where it walked, I walked. Wherever it went, I went. Confirming I'd follow, it began hugging the grass and picking up speed, until I spotted a level 1 wilderness treasure chest ahead and crouched to let it coil back onto my wrist. I tossed stones around the box to confirm it was safe, then opened it with the snake-wrapped hand for 15 units of white level 1 wood, 3 units of white level 1 stone, and 2 cups of drinking water. My snake clearly had the knack for finding chests, lucky or not, and it beat me running blind circles. I stowed the haul and kept walking, snapping off branches to store whenever I passed any, until Crescent Moon suddenly straightened, head aimed downhill. I wondered whether something was over there, danger or a chest, and squatted to touch the ground and let it decide, since for a chest it should go down, and for danger it should refuse, or run uphill. The snake tilted its head, plainly deciding its owner was stupid and couldn't understand it, then slid down and darted a few meters before looking back to hurry me along, because ahead there was something delicious. I told it we were leaving, getting it this time, and walked fast with the snake back on my wrist. At the edge of a thicket I saw a small flower field still dozens of meters off, packed with flowers and grasses of every color, red and white and blue and green and purple and pink and yellow. The tags named 7 kinds: wild peony, another wild peony, wild orchid, wild Chinese rose, wild sunflower, wild lanternflower, and wild honeysuckle, all level 1 and all in their flowering window available to pick. Some grew a single bloom atop a stalk, some scattered small flowers along vines, some spread in patches with strings of blossoms hanging from their branches. I'd seen the chat channel mention lucky players stumbling onto large patches of pickable plants, and this had to be one of those randomly refreshed bulk resources. Picking flowers it was, then, and I scouted the area first, walking up to a spot slightly above the patch, then throwing small stones low to the ground to avoid damage before heading in. I picked a single honeysuckle and the notice popped at once. One white level 1 honeysuckle, a tiny flower sitting in my palm. Crescent Moon brought its head close and opened its mouth at the flower, and I held it up to the snake's head, watching it swallow the bloom whole and feeling honestly confused, because a snake eating a flower made no sense to me. It wasn't interested in the chives or cabbage at home, so I asked it whether it only ate things that had a level, tapping its tiny head. Fine, if it wants flowers, flowers it gets, as long as it eats, since anything with a level beats anything without, even though I hadn't checked the honeysuckle's material info yet. I picked another, checked the info first this time. White quality, craftable, usable, with slight medicinal value. Then fed it to the snake. The materials would sell, but since Crescent Moon found the place, I'd let it eat its fill before thinking about other uses. After more than 10 honeysuckles, I finally heard a different chime. A green quality flower plus a drop seed. Better than the white ones. I tucked the seed away and examined the green bloom. Unchanged in appearance, but its info now reading craftable, usable, with medicinal value. The word slight gone. I didn't know exactly how much the difference meant, and since I was picking to feed the snake anyway, I read it over and kept feeding. I held a peony flower the size of a fist in front of Crescent Moon, marveling that it could actually eat all of this, and watched its mouth open wide, swallow a bit from the back, then slowly gulp the whole thing down. I knew how a snake looked swallowing something large, but seeing its skin stretch so thin it seemed a single translucent layer still shocked me. I twisted the petals together as tight as I could, and they were still as thick as my thumb, while the snake itself was only about as thick as a chopstick. Would it really not burst? After a few seconds of internal conflict, I just looked away and decided not to worry about it. Once the flower passed into its mouth, it broke down with each swallow, nearly digested by the time it reached the midpoint of the body. I told it to keep going and eat more if it could, and I went on plucking, feeding the small flowers whole and twisting the larger petals together for it to swallow slowly. The big ones, the peony and wild Chinese rose and herbaceous peony, gave only a flower or two per plant, while the small kinds, the orchid and lanternflower and sunflower and honeysuckle, grew in clusters. As I stripped them, some plants withered and dissolved the instant their flowers were gone, while others kept their bodies and only lost their blooms, the sort whose roots could likely be harvested too. I eyed the loose soil and decided to dig, and since I couldn't afford harvesting tools yet and didn't want to walk home for the reclamation hoe, I found a few long thin stones, crouched, and started prying. 23 plants remained, peonies and herbaceous peonies and orchids, and when I dug up an herbaceous peony root system I got only a small white piece, the bulk of the plant counting as nothing, and crumbling to dust the moment it left the ground. This is medicine too, eat it, I told the snake, feeding the section of root from my palm and digging on. Peony roots, herbaceous peony roots, orchid roots, things I'd never handled and couldn't have named the uses for, all showing medicinal value now. I muttered that we would rest a bit, sitting down sweat-soaked and tired but in a fine mood, watching Crescent Moon rest its head on the back of my hand, because at least my snake could finally eat a full meal. After a breather I kept on, digging out every last root, and once the patch was cleared, everything but the dropped seeds went into Crescent Moon's mouth. Past 3 in the afternoon, I checked the time, stood, and walked toward the peak to plant the seeds, and from the summit I could see the surrounding mountains all rose higher than mine, yet this one mountain was absurdly large, the farthest I'd explored still probably just the summit zone of the whole thing. I went up to the mountain spring for a short break, let Crescent Moon play in the water, stripped off my equipment to wash away the dirt and sweat, washed myself, dried off, geared up, and carried the snake home. At the door I set it down to catch bugs in the field, while I went inside for the reclamation hoe and got back to work. I'd left the mission at 44:50 and the flowers had dropped 15 seeds total, so after finishing the mission I'd still have 9 seeds to spare. I reclaimed land, leveled it, planted the seeds and watered, and the panel confirmed the mission complete. 50 reclamations done, 50 survival points credited along with the daily planting gift pack, which opened into 10 portions of soil. This soil differed from the field dirt, since having a level meant it could go in flower pots, so I took out the pot and poured in one portion, exactly enough to fill it. I dug with a finger and planted a peony seed, and the panel listed it as potted, normal, harvestable in 120 hours. 3 harvests possible, currently in seed germination, the countdown and harvest count matching the fields. Either way, the pot could be moved or stored, and if wild creatures came to cause trouble, the potted plants would be far easier to handle. I still had the bag of level 1 fertilizer at home, so I poured it in and watered, and the panel updated to a triple acceleration effect lasting an hour. Aside from the layer of fertilizer and the damp from watering, there was no visible change yet. The acceleration running an hour for the water and an hour for the fertilizer, stackable scaling off the base speed, with the harvest countdown now shedding 3 seconds for every real second instead of 1. I decided to try the skill, watching Crescent Moon return from eating a few bugs, letting it twine around the chain again, then holding the flower pot and triggering plant modification. My energy dropped 100 points, and the panel told me the level 1 peony had gained the special effect, Gorgeous Transformation. Locked and unmodifiable. The plant had converted from an ordinary crop into a special one that would put out an amplification effect after blooming, lasting 360 hours over a 10-meter radius, boosting animal and plant growth speed by 10%. I repeated the name Gorgeous Transformation to myself, the energy drain leaving me weak, more conflicted by the conversion than anything, since the name felt strange. But looking at it beside the survival phase that had appeared at noon, no Zuo no Die, I figured it was probably just some game designer's hobby. Although the amplification was very good, I figured I could sell this thing and do something else with the proceeds, and I sat to recover energy while I opened the auction to search similar amplification items, prices climbing high enough to get me a little excited. The mall prices were all set by sellers, so I switched to the exchange for a cleaner read, and after entering keywords for amplification effects, turned up plenty of matches, more items with a single auxiliary effect than with two, and the prices. One with a 10% dual amplification and 120-hour duration, more than 4 hours left on its listing, had already been bid up to 7,800 survival points. I wondered whether animals and plants meant players counted too, since the price felt steep, and using this for low-level planting and breeding didn't seem worth it at all. But what if it wasn't meant for breeding and planting? I didn't know how many races of players existed. Even humans could count as primates, and even if players couldn't use it, there were pets raised at home. Thought of that way, the price stopped seeming strange, since the whole survival game shared one trading interface. Although our home needed it too, I decided I needed to earn survival points now, and since random quests could be refused, I should build the home's defenses sooner rather than later. So I put the pot of unsprouted Gorgeous Transformation peony up on the auction at the minimum 30-minute timer, starting bid 0, the way every non-mall item started. The instant I listed it, a player jacked the bid straight to 20,000 survival points. It really was valuable, and I glanced at the price before closing the auction and switching to the mall to buy a level 1 fence construction blueprint. Like the house upgrade blueprint, these basic protective items ran cheap, just 10 survival points, a fence section taking only white level 1 wood, length 1 meter, height 30 centimeters, thickness 20, defense 3, durability 100. The area inside it warded so non-players and creatures not belonging to players couldn't cross. The fence needed only wood, so I built several sections around my field, a barrier low enough to step over easily. Thick planks and strips crisscrossed with some pieces driven straight into the soil. I settled on a ward, since the field was only 80 square meters, but I wanted my house enclosed inside it too, so that even at night I could come out within the warded ground to handle bugs or watering on the field at any time. I built in a circle, leaving open space in front of the house, running a straight line around it, and finally closed everything into a rectangle, 10 meters by 18, 56 fence sections eating 112 units of wood. I didn't add a gate, since both Crescent Moon and I could go over the top freely, and for now a gate seemed pointless. With the fence done, I fetched 2 more buckets of water, then searched the auction again to compare prices, and saw that 30 minutes had passed and my listing had closed. The pot of Gorgeous Transformation peony had sold for a top bid of 24,500, the 10% auction fee of 2,450, deducted, leaving 22,050 survival points to withdraw. I pulled the points and added to what I had before. I now held 22,123.4. With money, I started preparing other things. First, a well, because I could always fetch from the mountain spring but couldn't go out at night, and that spring drew plenty of wild creatures I had no strength to confront. Since I had the funds, I splurged, buying 39 units of level 1 stone off the exchange at the lowest price of 48 survival points each, which with the 11 already in my inventory gave me enough for construction. The well blueprint needed a section of stonework, taking a 1 meter by 1 meter footprint, storing 50 liters of water an hour, a level 1 source good only for field irrigation and feeding animals. I set the build location in front of the house as near the field's edge as I could, chose to construct, and after a flash of white light the well was done. The wellhead stood about 10 centimeters above the ground, made of gravel, water sitting just a dozen centimeters below the rim. The well looked only 2 or 3 meters deep, and even when I pressed a bucket down the water would splash but never spill over the edge. I could only sigh at how regulated the game world's creations were. Nothing like the mountain spring outside, the wellhead drawable with tools but impossible to modify. Crescent Moon slid down my arm, circled the gravel rim, and stared into the water again and again, since there was water here but it couldn't get in. "This is just for nighttime," I told it. "If I put it in a bucket you can play," and drew a bucket full and lowered the snake in. Now that I had the well, I kept preparing usable things for myself. A new bed, a stove, some salt and fatty meat to actually cook a meal. The mall priced the level 1 wooden bed blueprint at 100 survival points, a touch dearer as a living category item. So I told myself I'd look first and see what the 20,000 could really buy, adjusting the view to sort from the highest price down. At the top sat a level 1 crafting table at 10,000, a level 1 feed machine at 10,000, a fertilizer machine at 10,000, and a level 1 skill book at 10,000. That last one marked limited to a single copy. Below them, a level 1 flame tower at 9,000, a level 1 defense tower at 8,800, and on down from there. The crafting table, feed machine, fertilizer machine, and the unique skill book were the priciest things visible, with nothing at all in the 10 to 20,000 range, only a handful of items at 10,000 before the prices fell off scrolling down. I wasn't thinking about the rest for now, so I bought the skill book first, 20,000 minus 10,000. The points deducted as the level 1 skill book dropped into my inventory. The level 1 skill book cracked open in my hands and handed me plant communication technique. Level 1, a skill that let me hold spiritual conversation with the plants around me. The fine print hurt, since at level 1 the success rate sat at a flat 1%. The effect when it landed was random, and it drained 10 energy a second. This was somehow worse than the modification technique, which at least always produced an effect even if the effect was a coin toss, where this one charged a fixed toll of energy and gave nothing I could count on. It was a skill all the same, so I told myself not to overthink it twice, and went back into the mall to hunt down the things I actually needed. 1%. I could live with that. The first thing on my list was a way to cook and eat, so I bought a level 1 stove and set it in a corner, its footprint exactly 1 square meter, and since a stove came with no pot, I set the durability warm wok on top. Then I spent 100 survival points on a level 1 single bed blueprint, which read out 2 meters long, just over half a meter wide, a bonus of 5% extra recovery speed while resting. Durability now tracked as a percentage instead of 1 use per lie down. I crafted it on the spot, stored the old damaged bed with its single use left, laid the new one down and moved the wooden pillow and straw mat over, figuring I'd keep using a few old things even with money in my pocket. What to do with the broken one I'd decide later. A pot, a stove, a bed, and still I was short a prep table and cooking tools, all of which the mall had. A level 1 dining table came with a food warming effect good for 3 hot servings at 500 survival points, and a full set of cooking tools went for 600. Knives and a cutting board, a spatula, a ladle, chopsticks, and a wooden bowl, plate and basin. After that, I dropped 880 on a kilogram of granular salt, and 310 on a 1 kilogram block of pure white pork fat, which I'd cut up so the rendered lard could grease a few meals to come. Then I took the bone-in rabbit out of my inventory, let the snake coil my finger, and brought it close, and it opened its mouth plainly wanting in but couldn't get the chump down. I told it I'd cut the rabbit first, sliced the meat into strips with a new knife, stripped as much off the bone as I could, and left the bones for stewing with cabbage later. Then I fed the little white snake until it was full, and now it ate as fast as I could hand pieces over, swallowing every scrap and opening its mouth for more. I asked whether it wanted fatty or lean, with no idea which it preferred, bought a piece of lean pork, cut both ways and set them out to let it choose. Crescent Moon went for the fatty, so I stored the lean cut, carved the fat into strips, and kept feeding, buying more, cutting, feeding, until my points had bled down to 6,616, only half a pound of fat left, and the snake's whole job was to eat its fill and sleep, after which it woke up stronger than me. The panel read Level 1, Combat Power 2, Attribute Space, Skill Undeveloped, now sleeping and growing. Growth, not a level up, with no way to know whether its level would shift once it woke, but either way growth was a good thing. The sleeping snake had gone limp, so I laid it by the pillow. Past 5 in the evening already, with no appetite for grinding, I opened the window and door and started dinner. The rabbit bones, the lean meat, a head of cabbage, and the bit of cabbage heart from before all going in. Once I'd washed the wok, cut the fat, and lit the stove. So much in this world carried both data and physical reality, a constant reminder this was a game mode world. The half pound of fat threw off a surprising amount of oil. I ladled off half a bowl, dropped the lean meat and bones into fry, then added the chopped cabbage, a splash of the mountain spring water I'd kept in a bucket, and a pinch of salt. 10 minutes later, the whole house smelled like food. That smell alone was almost worth the day's grind. With oil and salt in it, the meal went down genuinely well, and after one hard piece of bread and a bowl of the dish, I felt I could take a little more, so I pulled out a second piece and finished slowly while scrolling the chat channel. This time I was truly full. I washed the bowl and chopsticks outside with well bucket water and set them by the stove, and there was still meat and vegetables in the wok, enough for one more meal in the morning, when all I'd have to do was reheat. It was getting dark, so I figured I'd buy some flower pots and give the skill another try. A glance at the time put it past 5:30, and I opened the exchange and started searching level 1 flower pots, which could come not just from chests or planting gift packs, but from player crafting too, so a green quality filter had already appeared in the listings. The green pots each carried a different little bonus, one giving output up 3%, another growth speed up 5%, and the price ran a bit high. The cheapest white quality pot listed at 387, while the green ones started at 998 apiece. Scanning the bonuses, I saw nothing tied to quality or to mutation. The two things I actually wanted, so I went straight for the white pots and bought 8. I had 9 portions of soil in my inventory, but only 8 portions of seeds. which made 8 the number anyway. I ran through the day's seeds: peony, Chinese rose, orchid, honeysuckle, sunflower, lanternflower, all 7 types present, though I had only 2 Chinese rose seeds left after planting some earlier. I set the 8 pots down, filled them with level 1 soil, buried the seeds and watered each in turn, then dropped them all into my inventory, where any planted pot showed a growth paused indicator and would only resume once I took it back out. With dark coming on, I drew another bucket of well water, went inside and shut the doors and windows to work the skill where nothing could see in, then lined the pots against the wall and used plant modification technique, my energy back up to 109. The level 1 peony came back with yield up 20% for the 100 energy cost. The stage limit reached no second pass until it advanced. Just a yield bump, only 20%, a little let down, but at least it was positive, not a loss. With my energy down to single digits, I climbed onto the bed and began concentrated meditation cultivation, which always tipped me into sleep partway through. When I woke, it was already 11 at night. The first thing I felt the wind outside, wild and clawing at the walls. Something was out there, and lucky for me, I'd already built the fence. I sat and listened to the wind howl, picking out the roars of beasts woven through it, and felt again the peace the ring of fencing bought me. At this stage, high-level wild creatures wouldn't come at a player's home, but that mercy only covered the high-level ones, and a pack of level 0 animals with no fence could pin me in my doorway and gnaw the field clean, while I waited helpless inside. Besides, level 1 or level 2 could never count as high level, no matter how I turned it over. The mountain wind was a little strong, but nothing unusual. I let go of whatever was outside and picked up a pot of Chinese rose to run the skill again. I'd been cultivating since before 6, and in the 5-odd hours since, my energy cap had climbed 17 points to 128 without equipment. My energy fully restored on top of that. Whether it was the comfier bed or not wearing myself ragged by day, or simply recovering faster on a full stomach, I had no notification, so I made my guesses and moved on. I used the skill on the Chinese rose, and the result was nothing like a yield bump. The effect reads Spirit Awakening, locked the moment it landed, with further modification possible only after the plant advanced. The plant had transformed from a production-type crop into a spiritualized creature, a thing with a nurturing spiritual consciousness that on reaching maturity could choose to break free of the original body with a very high probability of backlash or escape, or else be converted through communication into a plant-type pet. Danger level before maturity, none. After maturity, extreme. The headache came on the instant I read that word, extreme. In the dead of night, this luck, good or bad, to roll a plant with an extreme danger rating, surely that took a stroke of luck of some kind. The trouble was the danger pointed straight at me, and the communication and convert path, given the bluntness of that warning, had to carry a vanishingly low chance. Still, I couldn't bring myself to sell a Chinese rose that hadn't even sprouted. I told the rose I'd raise it for now and see how it grew, and warned it not to bite me, because if it bit me, I'd stew it in a pot, tapping the pot and muttering a whole string of nonsense at a flower with no consciousness yet. With only 28 energy left, I had no interest in another cast, so I set the rose pot on the inner side of the bed, glanced at the sleeping snake, and lay back down to cultivate. A thought drifted up as I sank in, whether this could cure insomnia, since it dropped me off within minutes every time. I never stepped out to check, so I had no idea what else prowled near my home besides the gale. At the mountain spring west of the house, the red great snake circled the waterhole, lowered its huge head, and swallowed the birds it had thrown in earlier to soak. The blood scent drifted down the stream along the hillside, and a while later a tiger and 2 wolves came tearing up from the foot of the mountain. As they reached the top, black mist slid over the red scales until the great snake hid completely, and near the mountain spring the tiger turned on the wolves refusing to believe they'd lose, the 3 locking on each other at the water's edge. The fight kindled at a touch, and they had already torn damage into one another when the black mist surged, and a snake tail far larger than the tiger's whole body came smashing down on heads that hadn't yet grasped the situation. All 3 were battered half to death, and the tail shoved the prey to the rim of the hole. It pressed one wolf's head into the water to soak, let the blood ride down the stream, then ate it once it had bled out enough, pushed the next in and crushed its head to keep the lure flowing, and finally dragged the tiger over for the same treatment. With them all eaten, a shimmer of light rippled across the red scales, and the great snake went quiet, waiting on the next bait to bite. Only when the wind died and one more lured bird had been swallowed, did the great snake stir the water with its tail, the spring scrubbing away every trace of blood, and after widening the hole a little more, it moved east along the mountaintop. Passing Yuwu's yard, it stared at the house a while, studied the plants in the field, looked down at the fence holding up its air wall, tilted its head, silently opened its mouth, shook its head, and slid off east. Since this little human's appearance had brought the mountain spring into being, it would keep an eye on the place and keep certain things from bothering him by day, because it didn't care to hunt in daylight anyway. Besides, the human seemed rather timid, and the tiny water-loving snake in his home was being raised well. Both of them little fellows, rather cute. The snake left, the wind stopped, and at 8 in the morning the sky brightened as most of the torn-up terrain, trees, flowers, and grass refreshed in an instant, leaving only the stone crevice mountain spring and its widened hole as the red great snake had left them. My eyes opened on survival game day 5. Daytime 8 to 6, sunny, 24 to 32 degrees, wind force level 2. The clock just passed 7:30. The task land reclamation and field preparation, none of 300 square meters cleared. The reward 30 survival points and a planting gift pack. More land to reclaim, and the task felt a little awkward. Maybe because I had no seeds left that several straight days of clearing for planting had quietly turned into clearing and prepping fields. The little white snake crawled up from under the bed and greeted me, having grown overnight. I told Crescent Moon it had grown fast and that I couldn't drape it around my neck anymore, then tapped its smooth, cold scales. My snake only had to eat its fill and sleep, and it woke up stronger than me. The panel confirmed it. Level 1. Combat power now 13. Attribute space, and a skill this time. Space Blade, an attack-type pet skill dealing 50 to 200% of the pet's combat power. Its combat power had jumped from 2 to 13, and it had a skill on top. I had no picture yet of what Space Blade looked like or how its damage worked, but my snake, once no bigger than a chopstick, had finally grown into something substantial. I straightened the snake out to measure, and it raised its head in confusion to see what I was up to, and I told it that at 2.5 meters it couldn't go on being a pendant around my neck. As I picked it up, 6 or 7 centimeters thick now, it twisted naturally, wrapping my waist, winding over my shoulder, and coming to rest beside my necklace again, so it could keep hanging on its master. I told it to go down and eat first while I found another pot to modify, spent 776 survival points on 2 dressed chickens, cut them up and set them out for breakfast, which got it to let go of me for a while. Sitting by the bed, I used the skill on a pot of orchid for 100 energy, the result breeding up 20%, the stage limit reached. The detail told me a plant with this effect would definitely yield plantable seeds or seedlings on harvest. A guaranteed return, the percentage on top adding quantity to that base. Then I picked up the Chinese rose from beside the bed, already pushing out little branches, and touched the leaves that hadn't fully opened. The tag read, Level 1 Rose, Mutation Spirit Transformation, lacking fertilizer, maturity in 112 hours. Unlike the other pots in normal growth, this odd rose was already hungry, so I opened the trading interface and went straight for the priciest player-made meat fertilizer. A portion ran 1,790 survival points and arrived as a bag no bigger than my palm, expensive and tiny at once. I told the rose it was eating the best in the house, digging a hole and pouring the blood-colored viscous fertilizer in, then brushing soil over it. I meant to keep it fed while it grew so it wouldn't go hungry and turn rebellious once full grown, since a thing left starving while young surely wouldn't behave well later. About half a minute later, the rose flipped to lacking water, so I took the half bucket of mountain spring water from my inventory and watered the pot bit by bit. Crescent Moon rested its head on my arm to watch, and when the rose suddenly moved, the snake's head froze, looked a few more times, then turned back to my face, as if to ask what was going on. A plant twisting and showing off harder than a snake. I told the snake it was plant growth acceleration, that after fertilizer and water the rose had crossed 5 hours of growth in 5 minutes, pressed its reared head back down, and told it not to fuss. Plants in this world already grew fast, and now this one was super accelerating on top of an already fast base. In 5 minutes, the rose reached about 1 meter 3, a single stalk 2 centimeters thick, dark green and dense with red thorns, leaves alternating along it, the largest the size of my palm. The color a green so deep it ran nearly black. The tag flipped to lacking light, maturity in 107 hours, and with hours yet before dawn it would have to wait, since the courtyard had no light and with no moon there was no moonlight, the only fix to wait for daybreak. I set the pot down, lit the stove, and heated last night's leftovers, breakfast running nearly to dawn. At 8, after a bowl of vegetables, a piece of dry bread, and a bottle of water, I opened the door and carried the rose outside into the sun, then dropped the other pots into my inventory and lined them up side by side. Some were already mature, and watching the white snake bolt into the field, I went down the plants one by one to a real harvest waiting. Basically everything from the first day was ready. Over 30 of the 50 from the second day mature too. A handful more only hours off. All harvestable in one sweep today. I called Crescent Moon and told it we were going for water, since even with a well I wanted to look at the mountain spring, partly for water and partly so the snake could play. My well too limited for a growing snake to splash in. The white snake slipped out from between the plants, glanced at me swinging the buckets, and wound around my clothes until it coiled my whole body. I told it it could still wrap around me now, but once it hit 10 meters, or dozens, it would loop me twice and I'd just vanish. I patted its head, felt the cool scales, and walked west, chatting at a snake that couldn't make small talk yet while I scrolled the chat channel. One player was complaining about how hard it was to raise combat power, so I opened my own player information. I was Mountain Forest Zone 9655. Player 11, Yu Wu, Human Race Planting Class, Energy 62 of 146 plus 10. From equipment, stamina 70 of 70, combat power 10. My skills, plant modification and plant communication at level 1. My method, concentration cultivation. My equipment ran the blue snake bone chain at 95% and worn white cotton shoes, pants and top. My pet crescent moon at combat power 13. My assets, the 15 square meter hut and an 80 meter field. My survival points 954 and change. My energy cap kept climbing and my combat power had hit 10. Not as strong as my own snakes, but I felt good about it, since apart from that level 3 snake that flattened me, I hadn't run into another real danger. The thread filled with bitter stories of players harassed by level 0 and level 1 wild creatures even without taking missions. Their combat power too low and their classes outside hunting, so they had no attack skills, and their fences kept getting smashed. One crafting class player had built a fence and well hoping for a quiet pastoral life, only to watch a mixed pack of level 0 and level 1 rabbits gnaw away the vegetables in the whole fence perimeter. The lonely wooden hut survived only because he never attacked the rabbits and the house stayed in safety mode. Another had killed a level 1 wolf and gotten his home besieged by a pack, surviving once the fence broke only by crafting fences non-stop and shifting position to throw up air walls, before going silent after a dozen broken messages. I figured my home might not see a wild animal for a very long time. When I reached the puddle below the mountain spring, I walked up with a helpless smile, because the puddle had grown and the small things left in it told a lot. The white snake shook its head toward the puddle, wanting to play, so I let it go in, stripped my equipment, and stepped into the irregular circle of water, more than 2 meters across. The bottom held stones and sand of every size, and mixed among them were ultra-small materials rarely seen on the market. Reaching into a gap, I pulled out a level 3 eagle feather fragment in green, a craftable material, and pictured the battle that must have happened here in the night. Some creature hunting and the hunted dropping pieces of themselves into the water. Combing the bottom clean, I came up with 3 level 3 eagle feather fragments in green, 2 tiger tooth fragments in blue, 4 wolf furs in white, and 2 crane claw fragments in white. I dried off, drew 2 buckets, and circled the puddle once more, finding no chest, though the day's haul was already exciting enough. The higher the level, the rarer such materials got, so I listed them all at a 0 starting bid on a 3-hour auction, and switched back to the chat channel, and almost at once a bid came in, a level 3 crane claw fragment in white at 1,000 survival points. Even white quality fragments fetching 1,000. In a fine mood, I went back to play in the water with Crescent Moon. A high-level creature was working this area, digging the puddle to hunt and feed. A very dangerous discovery. Except that at this stage, so long as I took no missions and never attacked a high-level creature, I wouldn't get marked for destruction. And the level 0 and level 1 creatures that could attack players simply wouldn't spawn where a high level 1 had been. Maybe scared off by its scent in the water. The white snake came up out of the water and quelled me again, nudging me to find food. I told it we'd hunt treasure chests and check for fresh flowers and grass on the way, and picked a direction into the wilderness back past the flower field, where only a few new shrubs had come up overnight. Then on, alternating running and walking, watching every harvestable tree. Then I remembered Crescent Moon had a skill, and asked whether it wanted to try attacking, tapping a poplar trunk and bringing the snake's head close while I worked out how to convey the idea. The trunk broke and toppled, the fallen poplar dissolving instantly into 3 level 1 wood and 20 firewood in my inventory. The strike Crescent Moon's space blade, a clean planer cut nearly straight through, a sliver of bark left that turned useless the moment the tree fell. I wanted to praise my snake, but one look at its head drooping listlessly told the story, so I told it to rest while I gathered firewood myself. Eat its fill, sleep, wake up stronger than me, and one skill cast still wrings it dry. I propped its head on my other shoulder, secured it, and kept walking the mountain, hunting resources, and bundling firewood. By 11 I'd found only 1 wilderness treasure chest, while Crescent Moon recovered and dropped 2 more trees. Then the auction notifications rolled in, the white crane claw fragment selling for 5,010, the white wolf fur for 8,053, the green eagle feather for 13,250, and the blue tiger tooth fragment hitting 95,250, all after fees. I tried my hardest not to laugh out loud. I failed. Yesterday, a single pot of flowers had cleared over 20,000, and I'd thought it a massive windfall. But that was only level 1, and against these level 3 fragments, the higher levels simply won. When I pulled all the survival points out and saw the total, 246,000 and change, I really couldn't hold the smile in. I felt like a broke kid who'd bumped into a billionaire and gotten handed a fat red envelope. Time to go home and see what I could buy. I hurried back, let the snake roam, and checked the listings. The mall first, still topping out at 10,000 points apiece, the same as the night before. With nothing new and no rush, I burned some energy on a pot of honeysuckle, which gave yield up 50%, then searched the auction since my points had jumped and I needed to turn them into things my household could use. Skill books? None. Equipment? Only 5 level 3 pieces, all white, already at 5 or 600,000 and climbing. Pet enhancement items? A few advancement and evolution pills, the level 1 versions already pricier than level 3 equipment. In planting, the top entries were level 2 green, but my skill only worked on level 1, so I passed on those too. After all that, I could only settle on level 1 player potions. A level 1 stamina enhancement potion sat at a current bid of 4,498 with a minute left, and stamina and energy potions ran about the same, but I needed the stamina boost more, since energy I could train while I'd found no growth path for stamina besides potions. There was a usage cap too, 50 uses before a level 1 enhancement item stopped working entirely. Tens of thousands were listed, prices bunched together and crawling once they hit around 4,500. Potions came from chests or herb crafting, and as long as players could brew them, the price stayed near the raw materials, with the crafters only striking it big through luck or an exclusive recipe. Then I remembered consignment, which had even more listings than the auction. The floor at 4,503. Simpler to buy straight from consignment, since the gap was only a few points and auctions meant waiting out the clock with a last-second snipe risk. So I bought from the lowest price down, on, players buying and relisting, and stopped after 49 potions. They ran me 220,600 and left me 25,578 and change. Even if those 49 didn't each push my stamina cap up 20, they should give a steady 17 or 18, and once used my cap should climb from 70 to 8 or 900, 1,000 if luck broke my way. With the bit left, I could buy a fertilizer machine and wood for a fence, since the rules kept high-level creatures from striking first and I could focus on self-improvement and growing the field. I spent 10,000 on a level 1 fertilizer machine, then 950 on 50 units of white level 1 wood. My assets now reading the hut, the 80-meter field, and a level 1 yard 30 meters by 30. With money in hand, I built the yard as big as I could, the perimeter going from 56 fences to 120, not folding in the mountaintop or stretching toward the mountain spring, just pushing east and south into a square private yard. Then I grabbed the reclamation hoe and dug along the field and fence to finish the day's task, 300 square meters. Reclaiming land ate stamina fast, and after a while mine dropped to single digits, so I went in and started a chicken and potato stew with green peppers, the day's meal. While it simmered, I set up the new fertilizer machine, a thing that processed materials into fertilizer, the level 1 model limited to level 1 fertilizer. The crafting line wanted 5 units of level 1 meat and a craft cost in energy, with a note that non-crafting players could spend survival points instead at 1 energy to 5 points could only process through the machine, and triggered no extra effects, the craft taking 10 minutes. Level 1 meat fertilizer sold around 1,800 and the cheapest meat about 290 a unit, so 5 pieces plus the 250 crafting cost ran 1,700 to produce. Each craft cleared about 100 survival points, 6 an hour, 144 a day, enough to earn back the machine in a single day, except it could only run 1 batch at a time, no stacking, no queuing. As I ate, I tallied the profit and realized I was turning a little money obsessed. Anyone rich enough to buy a manufacturing machine wouldn't have skipped skill books first. Normally people go out by day, can't sit at the crafting table, and put cultivation first at night, so the people with money wouldn't pour themselves into this, and the people without couldn't afford it, which explained the thin listings. The white snake came in through the open door, saw me eating, and slid over hungry for food. I told it the meat was its, and to eat up that I'd buy more when it finished, since we weren't rich but could at least eat our fill. I laid the sliced level 1 meat on a plate and set the snake on the table, where it coiled to the far side, its body taking up half the surface, and lowered to eat. This time it ate slowly, as if pacing me, 1 piece for every bite I took, and by the time I'd finished my bowl and a piece of bread, its plate was clean too. I asked if it wanted more, and the white snake shook its head, pressed it to the back of my hand, and wound back up my arm. Eat when hungry, cling lazily when full. That was the whole policy. I told the snake to speak up when it was hungry, since I just started a batch of flower fertilizer and wanted to check whether the rows needed feeding too. I washed up, set the dishes by the stove, and pulled the finished level 1 meat fertilizer from the machine, identical to the bag I'd bought that morning, the same high price and stingy amount. Outside, I squatted in front of the Chinese rose with its 2 small branches, dug a hole, and poured in a tiny bit, and stimulated by it the rose, which had shown nothing a moment before, flashed a requirement tag. I poured the whole bag in. A water deficiency tag came up as expected, and I poured in the morning's mountain spring water slowly. With enough water, it began its rapid twisting growth again, the tag flipping to normal, maturity in 93 hours. It had read 107 hours that morning, and 4 hours on, this round of feeding and watering had skipped the rows. 10 hours forward at high speed. In the warm sun, only physical change showed now. 3 main branches up from the roots, each with over a dozen smaller branches, more leaves stretching their thick blades. I stood to take it in, the rose well taller than me, probably past 2.5 meters, and still without a single flower bud. Tallest, hungriest, most dramatic resident in the house, and not a bloom to show for it. At about 2 in the afternoon, I finished the land reclamation task. 300 of 300 square meters complete. The reward 30 survival points and a planting gift pack. And I sat down to rest, worn through, the area big and the midday sun brutal on top of it. I called Crescent Moon, told it we'd head out for another look and grab 2 buckets of water on the way, and when the snake coiled around me, I felt the cool scales and stepped over the fence heading west. At the mountain spring puddle, I let the snake soak, stripped my gear, and got in to wash off the sweat and dust. After a while, the white snake came up and shook its head toward the bottom of the mountain to the west, prompting me that way. It had found nothing good in the morning, but now it could sense something delicious over there. I told the snake we'd go look, and held the white snake, which had coiled me and nuzzled my face, and set off in a straight line for the foot of the western mountain, alternating walking and running. After more than half an hour, I saw what had pulled my snake from such a distance. A level 2 snake blood vine, harvestable, set in a sprawling patch of green grass, a branch twisted like a snake with thorns shaped like snake scales. 3 small flowers rode it, red and pink and blue, each no bigger than a fingertip, shaped like open snake mouths. I told the snake it was probably something it could eat, but I had no idea whether the plant attacked people. I stopped outside the green grass, eyeing the only level 2 wild plant I'd seen so far and weighing the danger, because my own home already had that abnormal Chinese rose, and a level 2 plant in the wild might also strike first. A thrown stone landed next to the vine and stirred only a faint sway of grass, no danger that I could see, and yet I stayed uneasy. Crescent Moon's tail tapped my arm, telling me to put the stone down, because it would handle the thing over there. I held it back and told it no, it was only level 1 and the vine was level 2. The white snake shook its head, knowing I was worried even if it couldn't follow the words, and since I wouldn't let it go, it wouldn't, because it didn't need to get close to act. It coiled me, wrapped its tail around my other arm, and wound along my shoulder until the upper half reared up. I'm 1 meter 8'6", and with the snake reared on my shoulder, its head sat about 3 meters off the ground, and not understanding the plan, I still raised that arm to give it something to lean on, and it happily climbed higher. The higher the better. Its tail tapped my shoulder. It was about to start. I watched tensely, felt the tail tighten on my arm for an instant, and saw one of the 3 small flowers ahead get sliced clean off, and as it fell, the other 2 split open and a sheet of red light flashed past. The reared snake slid down and I caught it, and where that ring of red light had passed, the lush grass had corroded and withered completely, the light striking out at the exact height of Crescent Moon's head, leaving the surrounding trees at that height with varying corrosive damage. No wonder it had wanted to climb so high. Stroking its scales as it flicked its tongue at me, I understood for certain that it had reared as high as possible because it knew the vine would counterattack whatever struck it. Now its tail flicked urgently toward the vine, telling me the danger was gone, so I walked into the withered patch, watched the snake for any objection, and pulled the snake-shaped thing, about 1 meter long, out of the ground. It dropped a single level 2 snake blood vine in blue, nothing else, but the one material was high quality and carried a rare excellent effect. The detail read, blue quality, medicinal ingredient, craftable edible, with a note that serpentine creatures could consume it directly for a chance at a random enhancement effect. Serpentine creatures, the word being creatures, not pets, which meant snake-type players could use it too, and since it wasn't a potion, it wouldn't burn a potion usage charge. I told the snake to forget the rest, and holding a Crescent Moon gone limp from using its skill, turned to run for the mountaintop. The tail waved in front of me, pointing another direction, because it had seen a chest while reared up high and wanted it before we left. I turned to walk that way, wondering if there was more good stuff, and after more than 3 minutes, I saw a level 2 wild treasure chest, except this one sat at the top of a pine, a huge tree with no label, not a harvestable target. I told the snake to rest while I climbed, my stamina not too drained, and had it wrap my arms a few more times before I grabbed branches of every size and climbed until I touched the level 2 wild treasure chest, nestled in the fork of the crown. The chest opened on a body tempering cultivation technique, a level 1 pet egg, a 5-slot inventory expansion coupon, a level 1 crimson feather ring in blue, and 200 survival points. I took the lot and climbed down, running for the peak while I checked the haul. And even though this was only the second level 2 wild chest I'd seen, something felt off, because the contents matched the chest I'd opened on the second day almost beat for beat. That one had given the concentration cultivation technique that raised my energy cap, this one the body tempering cultivation technique that raised my stamina cap, and both held a level 1 pet egg, a 5-slot coupon, level 1 blue quality accessory equipment, and exactly 200 survival points. The only difference was no level 3 snake to scare me this time and no bird of uncertain level. This pet egg couldn't be a bird, could it? Back home, I lay on the bed, took the pet egg out, and thought suddenly of that bird that had snatched the snake last time, which I'd never seen clearly, but which had to be terrifyingly strong to grab a snake and vanish in an instant. Of course, I didn't think the one I'd gotten was that black snake with red in its name. The egg read hatchable random, so I stroked the white snake by my pillow and chose to hatch it, and if it really came out a bird, then it wouldn't just be random. The countdown ran 10 seconds, the shell dissipated, and a small black bird appeared in my hand. The pet had hatched, a level 1 bird. So much for random. I was certain now these 2 level 2 chests were absolutely abnormal. Still, the egg was already hatched, and I wasn't going to bully my own little fellow just because the chest was strange. The panel read, Pet Bird, Level 1, growing on its own or through feeding, Combat Power 1, Attribute None, Skill Undeveloped, much weaker than the little white snake. I asked the bird, about the size of a chicken egg, whether it was hungry, then minced a piece of meat on the cutting board. When I asked Crescent Moon whether it liked the bird and turned to bring it over, I found the white snake with its head pressed against the bird's side, and a closer look confirmed it really didn't mind the newcomer. Weren't these two supposed to be natural enemies? Maybe because both were pets in a player's home now, family, there was no hostility left. The little black bird rubbed against the snake's head twice, then hopped into my palm, lay down, and rubbed itself against my skin. I told it to be good and eat first, that this was its share while I cut food for Crescent Moon and myself. Seeing it could eat the minced meat, I cut large chunks on a plate for Crescent Moon's dinner, then turned to my own, plenty of potato and chicken stew left from lunch. Then I remembered the broken bed I'd stored and clicked dismantle for firewood, which turned it into 5 pieces, since broken things could be dismantled only before durability hit 0. The bird finished its meat and turned to call at me as I served my food, flapping wings still wearing only black down, looking back toward the door. I asked whether it wanted to go out, set my dinner on the table, picked up the little ones, and walked out, the bird running for the planting field on its short legs after the good food there. Crescent Moon came out the doorway and rubbed my hand. The field's food free for that silly bird now, since as a snake it didn't care for those squishy bugs. I told the snake to go play too while I ate first, patting its head, and went back in to eat with the door open, in a good mood. By the time I'd eaten and drunk my fill, it was just after 4 in the afternoon. More than an hour of light left. I took the meat fertilizer I'd set to produce and poured it into the rose's pot, and the roots consumed it. But instead of asking for water, the tad came up overstuffed, unable to absorb fertilizer for 12 hours. Maturity in 73 hours. I stared at it a little embarrassed since I'd just been weighing whether to make more and stuff it as full as I could. That plan was dead. Turns out plants can overeat too. The little black bird, done in the field and full of bugs, ran back to me, and I told it we'd fetch water again and then rest. I picked up the bird, the snake coiled right up, and carrying both I poured the last of the other bucket into the pot, and set off with the 2 empty buckets. At the mountain spring pool, the white snake went straight into the water, while the little black bird tested the surface with a claw, and after several tries dropped its head and dove in, faster in the water than on land. I watched it swim back and forth, lifting its head now and then for air, a hint of helplessness in my smile. A snake soaking made sense, but this little fellow was a bird, a hatchling with only a thin layer of soft down, and here it was playing like that. The down clearly waterproof. When I came out, the bird followed, and I told it to clean up for home, scooped it onto my shoulder, drew and stowed a bucket of water, and let Crescent Moon coil up my arm. Back in the yard, I set them down and learned the body tempering cultivation technique off my inventory. The method transmitted straight into my consciousness. Unlike the quiet mind calming concentration cultivation technique, this one was completely active, running and jumping and punching and kicking, supplemented by food buffs, potions, even harsh environments. So in the days to come, I might end up looking a little abnormal, lying back on the withered grass, wanting to smile but only managing a twitch. Relaxing builds energy, exertion builds stamina. My life was going to be very full. I put the crimson feather ring on my wrist and activated it. Reading accessory equipment 2 of 3 active. Stamina cap up 10, stamina recovery up 3%, the same numbers as the snake bone chain, only aimed at stamina instead of energy. I told Crescent Moon to eat its snake blood vine since we weren't going out today. The white snake pressed its head to my face and nudged me, curious why I was lying on the ground, and I told it I just felt like sensing the aura of the earth and to come back inside. Then jumped up, scooped the bird, and went in. The campfire still burned. I gave the vine to Crescent Moon, watched it swallow the thing whole, and set it on the inner side of the bed, the panel noting Level 1, Combat Power 13, Attribute Space, Skill Space Blade, strengthening via consumption of special items. Its strengthening was just sleeping quietly. The little black bird stood staring hard at the coiled snake, got no answer to its calls, and turned to look up at me, the snake ignoring it. I told the bird to eat more and sleep here once full, since I might not have time to look after it for a while, and set it on my shoulder, minced a piece of meat onto a plate, and set it on the table. Short on tableware, I bought a new set, put a bowl of water beside the minced meat, and let the little one eat and drink as it pleased. With nothing else to do, I took out a stamina enhancement potion and drank it, but instead of lying down to wait it out, I went outside to run circles around the house. Because plain running, once cultivation kicked in, felt the same inside, especially with the potion working. The soreness from the potion strengthening, layered onto the rapid stamina drain from cultivation, kept polishing my consciousness as the two overlapped. And once I started moving, only one thought remained, that I couldn't let it go to waste. The notifications came one after another. Effective strengthening, stamina cap up 1, effective strengthening up 1, effective cultivation up 1, on and on. By the time I couldn't hold on any longer and collapsed on the ground, the potion's effect had long since ended and the cultivation boosts had stacked up several in a row. I lay there worn through, my whole body tingling and numb, only my fingers able to twitch. The little black bird had followed me out and watched me run from the door. Now it came over on its short legs, nudged my fingers, got no response, and finally nestled in against my neck, since its master had fallen asleep too. The sleeping me would never see whether the sky was black or white. In the dark, with many creatures abroad that couldn't be seen by day, the red great snake came from the east again, stopping at the fence outside the once more expanded house. It saw the human asleep in the yard and silently opened its mouth, wondering whether the human was an idiot to sleep on wild grass when even a courtyard wall could block so little. The household snake, though, was being raised well. To the great snake, a level 2 snake blood vine wasn't precious, only because it no longer needed one, since traded to snake creatures in need, it could fetch the origin-strengthening items humans craved. And here was the human feeding unrestricted origin-strengthening goods to his snake while he swallowed capped, side-effect-ridden low-level potions. Then it leaned forward at the fluffy black ball huddled at the human's neck. A bird. Weak. A clumsy, foolish human. A rowdy space attribute hatchling snake. A fragile, attributeless hatchling bird. And a plant that had overeaten before it even grew up. My head hurt. I'd slept several hours and the wind on my head had left it sore. And that was what woke me. I took in the pitch-black surroundings, turned, and saw the light spilling from inside the door, and scrambled up to head in, only to feel something fall from my shoulder, which I caught, the little black bird. I stroked the now awake bird a few times, the soft downy fluff genuinely nice under my fingers. But it was better to get back inside, the wind too strong, the air wall good for blocking wild creatures but useless against wind and rain. At the door I glanced at the flower pots outside the house and decided to leave them for now. The stamina strengthening process would keep draining both stamina and energy, but the cultivation gains were gratifying enough to make up for it. My panel read Energy 86 of 146 plus 10, Stamina 54 of 113 plus 10, Combat Power 12. My cultivation techniques now concentration and body tempering both. My stamina cap had already been pushed to 113, but after a few hours in the yard, the clock reading 10:21 at night, both stamina and energy had only come back about halfway. I lay down to build energy this time, certain now that the higher the cap, the faster the progress, and that stamina cap strengthening by potion or cultivation demanded a lot of energy on top. I drank a bottle of water, lay on the bed with the bird on the far side of the pillow, and began concentrated meditation cultivation, the gale howling outside, none of it touching my home. I fell asleep fast once the meditation started, and shortly after 5 in the morning a notification sound woke me. It was a level 1 random quest, planting field protection, the ripening crops having drawn the attention of some wild creatures. On accepting, I'd face level 1 to level 2 attacks on the field and have to fend off 10 waves. The reward 2,000 survival points and 1 random level 1 equipment. The ripening crops had triggered another random quest. I declined without a second of thought, and the system noted my refusal, dismissed the quest and let everything settle back to normal. 2,000 points and a random drop. Not for 10 waves of teeth in my field. Past 5, and since I was up I had no plan to sleep again. I glanced at the snake and bird sleeping on either side of me, and got up to harvest the mature crops first. I bought a piece of fatty meat, gathered the vegetables piled in the house, and set about a potato and cabbage stew. I lit the fire, cut the fat and dropped it all in, scooped the rendered oil into a basin, then added the vegetables and salt to stew slow. With it simmering, I opened the door, walked into the pitch-black yard, and lit a campfire beside the field, since there was no cap on campfires but no putting one out either once lit, the only option to start a new one elsewhere. I fed it 3 pieces of firewood, enough to burn till dawn, and walked into the field by the firelight. The level 1 cucumber I'd planted on the first day had been accelerated a few times and now read mature, none of 3 picked yet. The vines tangled together, and searching through them I picked 5. 3 white and 2 green, along with 2 cucumber seeds, the tag now wanting a day before another harvest. I sat by the campfire and read the detail. The white cucumber an ingredient. Craftable, edible, restoring 1 energy. The green one the same but restoring 2. Level 1 vegetables came with recovery built in. Though for a cucumber that size, the whole thing only gave back 1 or 2 energy. Still, a free direct recovery, no point being picky. After grumbling the numbers were too low, I caught myself getting ahead of things, because I'd once had my stats crash to the absolute floor, and back then a bit of this food would have looked like treasure. The prices weren't much anyway. White cucumber about 40 survival points, green 4 or 500, and besides the recovery they were vegetables my household needed to eat, so since I wasn't short on money I had no plan to sell them. Several more cucumbers read ready in a few dozen minutes or hours, and of the 50 crops planted on the second day, most of the white quality ones were already harvested, the rest either green and not yet mature, or the multi-harvest types. The clock turned to survival game day 6, daylight 8 to 6, overcast 22 to 26 degrees. Wind force 5. The time 5:43 in the morning. The quest planting 20 level 1 or higher crops. The reward 200 survival points and a planting gift pack. The standard for the planting quest was that the crops had to be level 1 or higher, and the cheapest level 1 seeds were single harvest vegetables: cabbage, oilseed rape, radishes, celery, the consignment floor on even those sitting at 90 survival points. The expensive ones weren't really far off, since anything sold in the mall topped out at a listed 99. The price held steady mainly because farming profession players kept the demand constant. The daily quests came as land reclamation, or planting, or both together, and there had never once been a quest tied to harvesting. There was no rush, the wind still strong enough that I told myself to stay inside a while longer, though I left the door open all the same. I glanced at the Chinese rose, which showed almost no change for all my fussing, then sat down to try another skill, since I'd already worked plant modification technique on my crops, and watched it throw off several effects. This plant communication technique was the new one, and without counting equipment, my energy capped at 168, the skill burning 10 a second, 16 seconds at the outside. But whatever came of it, I had to try it once. The pot of Chinese rose sat just past the open door. I reached out with my spirit to brush its branches and leaves, and my energy started bleeding off 10 at a time. The skill live, but the success rate so low it was almost insulting. When my energy fell under 10, my projected spirit lost its focus, and I lay flat on the floor with a heavy sigh. Every attempt a failure. The fast drain left a mental exhaustion that gnawed worse than physical tiredness. So I dragged myself up, fell onto the bed, and switched on concentration cultivation technique before sleep took me, since more energy was always more energy. Crescent moon woke before me. The snake lifted its head, looked me over, then slithered up from the pillow to nudge the still sleeping dark plume and ask what had happened, why the master hadn't stirred when it was already light and the door still hanging open. The little bird woke with a start, raised its head, and blinked up at the snake with round aggrieved eyes, since it had dropped off the moment it got home the night before and knew nothing either. Crescent moon stared a beat longer, then slid off the bed wearing a put-upon look and went out to the courtyard to see for itself. Spotting bugs working through the planting field, it turned straight back to the bed, let dark plume perch on its head, and carried the little thing out to find something good to eat. By the time I surfaced again, it was 9 in the morning, and I told myself that I had been a comfortable sleep, my energy cap reading 184 now. The higher the base, the more cultivation seemed to add. I got out of bed and stretched, grinning at my data profile. Cultivation really was the kind of thing that hooked you. I told the snake and bird we'd fetch water first and eat once the plants were watered. Stepping out and finding the two of them already busy in front of the house, I noticed both buckets had dropped under half durability, so I pulled up the consignment listings, where the price had eased a little. I spent a touch over 4,700 survival points on 10 new buckets, one per inventory slot since I had 20 and held next to nothing. Dark Plume hopped to my side, jumped into my palm, and rode up onto my shoulder. The snake had leveled and evolved in its sleep, grown a bit bigger again. And though it still wanted nothing more than to wind around me, it tested wrapping its head over my arm and worked out on its own that it had outgrown being carried. My panel told me Crescent Moon was a level 2 pet now. Combat power 102. Its attribute space, its skill space blade at level 2. The attack dealing 70 to 250% of its combat power. The level 2 blue quality snake blood vine had dragged its skill up along with its level. Triple digits now. I noted as much while I walked the path. 102 against my own grand total of 14. One hand down to stroke the snake's head where it pressed into my palm. As a farming profession player, both skills I'd unlocked were planting through and through, so I wasn't about to catch up by punching anything. I told the two of them to go play while I got the water, and at the mountain spring I found the hole grown a little wider again. My big shot neighbor passed through once more, though no material fragments lay at the bottom today. I stripped off my equipment and waded in, the snake swimming circles and dark plumes splashing beside me, and filled the buckets one at a time before storing them and turning back to play with my little household. I decided I should give the bird a name, watching it dart through the water. Its pet entry listed it only as bird, no species, no attribute, nothing to go on. So I named it for its color, Dark Plume, careful not to lift the feather from my own name and borrowing plume instead. The bird surfaced and hopped into my palm, and as I raised it up, it beat its little downy wings and fired off a run of urgent chirps. Then a notification dropped in cold. The system told me Dark Plume had triggered an evolution task, its combat power at the extreme minimum, and that I, the player, could choose to bear the negative effects in its place. A refusal assumed if I didn't answer, the count already running down from 10. I scrambled out of the water looking like a fool, called that we were going home, and ran while shrugging my equipment back on, since even without knowing the negative effect, the gear lent me a little nerve. Crescent Moon watched me bolt, then peeled out of the water after me, far quicker than I was now that it had evolved and leveled. With the countdown nearly spent, I accepted the negative effects before I'd reached the house, and the snake's body caught me as I dropped, its tail looping me, hauling me past the fence, and flipping me inside the yard before it coiled up to wait. Then it bared its teeth at Dark Plume, perched on the courtyard wall and looking ready to leave, blaming the whole business on the bird. Dark Plume hopped along the fence, peered down at me lying senseless, let out one small aggrieved chirp, then dropped off and tottered away on its short legs as far as it could go. I wondered whether this was the negative effect, because all at once I had the feeling the last few days in the survival game had been a dream, and I'd woken from it standing on my walk to work again. The chaos of street noise pressed in around me, so I stepped aside and sat on a roadside chair. I was certain the past few days were no dream, but that left the question of how to get out of here, and the harder question of what exactly this negative effect was going to be. Someone beside me shouted, asking whether it was about to rain, and I looked up too, and the thought landed flat and unwelcome, that this lightning surely wasn't coming for me. Under the dark piled clouds, I got up and ran for a nearby plaza, more open ground, on the logic that if I really was about to get struck, the fewer things around me the better. A muffled crash rolled through, my body swayed, and I stumbled before pushing on, while behind me a roadside tree took a lightning strike and burst into fragments, the air going sharp with the burnt stink of it. A few steps later, a pillar went the same way. After those two strikes, the crowd scattered screaming, cars slamming into one another as if the wheels had stopped answering, so that by the time I reached the open heart of the plaza, the people had vanished, at impossible speed. I told myself it was fine now and stood in the clear space looking up at the flashing cloud mass, waiting on the lightning, since it was only a strike and I'd just grit my teeth and take it. I could guess my body had lost control back there and the snake had carried me home. All of this the spiritual world dressing itself up. Then, waiting on a lightning bolt that never came, my whole body went numb and I hissed without meaning to, caught between real pain and the urge to laugh. The storm and the panic were only a fright dressed up. The thing I actually had to endure rose from inside me. I couldn't put a name to it. Pain, then itch, then ache. Then numbness, then weakness, then cold, then heat. Every sensation shoving the last aside and throwing itself at me at random. No sign of how long it meant to last. I knew it wouldn't truly harm me. Knowing did nothing for how brutal it felt. Overhead, the thunderclouds kept rolling, and I stood telling myself not to move. The harder it got, the slower time seemed to crawl, until the whole storm of sensations cut out at once, and I smiled and lay down, home or not, to sleep it off. Back in the yard, Darkplume shook the new colorful feathers on its crown and peered down at the master with a worry it couldn't quite parse. Crescent Moon, unsure whether the master had passed out or only fallen asleep, decided he must be sleeping and settled close against him to wait him out. The bird, meanwhile, hopped and flew and made a racket, round thunderballs blasting wide stretches of trees and dead grass and stone to bits, then edged back in, brushing its longer feathers soft against the master's face. Just as it meant to lie down, it sensed a bug in the planting field, blurred into a black streak, and came up with a fat insect. It wiggled the bug pointedly at Crescent Moon while it ate, the snake looking over with open disgust and going back to ignoring the smug little thing. I came back around 3 in the afternoon, finally home, moved my fingers, and stroked the cold scales, my whole mind easing. I held still about 10 seconds, then opened my eyes and sat up, and Darkplume burrowed into my arms, its still fluffy head rubbing at me as if to tell me I'd worked hard. I told it that it had grown, and that it had turned out not to be pure black after all. The little bird ran 30 or 40 centimeters, now counting the tail feathers. Still downy black across the body, but its new wing and tail feathers, like the small plumes on its head, came up colorful. And not one color apiece either, each feather able to shift its color, matching or clashing with the rest. My panel read it as a level 1 pet, combat power 51, healthy, attribute lightning, with 1 skill thunderburst ball and offensive area skill that hit everything in a certain radius for damage running 30 to 110% of its combat power. The bird's combat power had jumped 50 points, its lightning attribute had switched on, and a skill had woken with it. The attack value on Thunderburst Ball ran a little low, but it was a ranged skill, and everything inside the area caught the same intensity. I muttered about the lightning attribute, remembering the great thundercloud that had hung over me through the negative effect, and added there'd be no detonating thunderballs at home. Pressing twice on the bird's small head, I told the little fellow, now that it could fly, plainly and again, not to do any damage to the house, least of all with a range attack like that. Then I called time to eat. Nothing in my stomach all day. I set Darkplume on my shoulder, patted Crescent Moon's head, and went inside, reheating the dishes over the stove, and, while they warmed, buying meat and cutting it across 2 plates. And 1 person, 1 snake, 1 bird. The family of 3 sat down to a half-day late meal. Water first, then plant, then back out for more water. I ran the order in my head, and ate fast before heading to the field to harvest everything ready. The carrots took the 1 harvest, a white carrot and a seed. The wheat gave 4 white stalks, a green one and a seed, and the cucumbers planted on the second day came to 11 across 3 plants, 3 green and 8 white, plus 2 seeds. I laid the produce into a wicker basket and started planting in the patch I'd cleared the day before, setting out my 6 harvested seeds, and since that wasn't enough, I bought another 14 white-quality level 1 cucumber seeds off the consignment at 99 survival points each. Survival points sure vanished fast. I just dropped 1,386 on seeds, leaving me 1,800 and change, with 4,000 gone on buckets and the steady meat buying eating plenty more, so what was left barely covered a single batch of fertilizer. I had to make money, so once the planting and watering were done, I'd head out hunting treasure chests again. Hoe in hand, I set the cucumbers off in their own area, then squared away the messy plot from before, and planted the wheat and carrot seeds. The system marked the daily task done, 20 level 1 crops planted, and handed me 200 survival points and a planting gift pack which opened to a level 1 nursery field construction blueprint. The blueprint laid out a nursery field exclusive to the farming profession, 2 meters by 2, room for 4 crops. Every plant grown in it carrying a chance at seed advancement, quality enhancement, higher yield, even mutation. The catch was the cost, 20 units each of white quality level 1 meat, plant, and mineral fertilizer and soil. The fertilizer draining as the crops grew, so I'd have to watch it close. I latched onto the seed advancement line first, since the shop only sold level 1 white seeds, and the only ways up were the wild, treasure chests, or nursery cultivation like this. But it would have to wait. The material's steep and my money already blown the day before. I told the snake and bird we'd fetch water, and after emptying the buckets over the fields and pots, I called the 2 of them out with me. Past the gate, I stopped at the great blasted scar on the mountain, turned, and caught Dark Plume as it dove into my arms, wondering whether this was its doing when it evolved as I looked the damage over. Standing in my hand, the bird eyed the area its thunderballs had cratered and flapped happily, as if to say it had evolved right here without touching the house. Brutal little thing. I admitted as much, then told them we'd grab the treasure chest first. Scanning around, I spotted a wilderness chest and ran for it. The level 1 chest giving up 15 units of wood, 1 drinking water, and 1 bread. Nothing dazzling, but the total ran over 300 survival points in value. A fine enough haul. After a quick sweep that turned up nothing else, we came back to the pool below the mountain spring, where I filled the buckets while I bathed. And by 10 past 4 I was home again. The Chinese Rose's overfed tag had cleared, so I bought materials, cooked a batch of meat fertilizer, worked it into the pot, watered it, and tapped the leaves where the color had deepened by way of greeting. After that, I left the planting skills alone, set the snake and bird inside with the door open, and drank a bottle of stamina enhancement potion. The system reported effective strengthening, stamina limit up 1, then effective cultivation. Another up 1, the ping stacking as it took hold. This time the potion sat easier than the first 2 rounds, my mind nearly clear. Instead of running laps, I worked the simple movement drills that came with body tempering cultivation technique, reproducing them over and over until, after an hour, I'd fully absorbed the dose. It added 20 to my stamina limit and the hour of exercise 6 more, though by the end both stamina and energy had slid down. I lay down 10 minutes, then went back out, lit a campfire beside the well, and drank another bottle, the absorption quickening each round. An hour at first, then easing toward 50 minutes after a few passes. The sky had long gone pitch black, the campfire still burning, and I kept at it single-minded into the small hours, drinking through another 6 bottles, each stacking 20 onto my limit, while my own cultivation pulled 6 or 7 points an hour beside it. By the time I checked my panel, my combat power read 24. I'd burned 8 level 1 enhancement potions now, all of them poured into stamina, which had climbed close to 300. I couldn't keep going, partly because I was hungry and tired, partly because midnight had turned the page on a new day. Today, it rained. The system framed the 7th day for me. Moderate rain. The clock just passed midnight. The day's task: land reclamation and field preparation, across 200 square meters for 200 survival points, and a planting gift pack. The rain had come in the small hours of that 7th day. The daylight shortened along with it. The air wall did nothing to keep it out, the falling water dousing my campfire on the spot. The fire that had hours of burning left scattering into useless charcoal the instant the drops hit it. The rain was heavy, and I was meant to reclaim land in it. Poor weather for the work, but that could keep till tomorrow, so for now I'd head in to eat, then cultivate and sleep. I told all of them to get up on the bed to sleep, since even a faint effect counted for something, and I stroked the scales of one and smoothed the feathers of the other. With only 300-odd survival points left, and not much to eat, I brought over cucumbers and tomatoes, fed the 2 of them a bit, ate a few myself, and got ready to turn in. Then I caught that my energy still had use in it, recovered past 140, so I touched the Chinese Rose's leaves and worked plant communication technique, the skill bleeding 10 a second, and the notices scrolling up. The rose had gained an accelerated growth effect at triple speed for 3 hours. Its mood up 2 to a value of 2, the panel noting that with the mutated consciousness not yet born, the mood effect ran weak. The notices climbed until my energy hit single digits and the skill cut itself off. I murmured that the trick was mood. It came down to coaxing. The friendlier it felt, the better our footing, and I'd have to raise it the way I raised the snake and the bird, the way I raised myself. I told it to grow well, that I was worn out and going back to lie down because energy was never enough. And I patted its leaves, left the door open, and dropped onto the bed. I switched on concentration cultivation technique, ran it in earnest a few minutes, and slipped under. After I was gone, Crescent Moon lifted its head toward the dark outside, then pressed it down against my shoulder, while on the other side, Dark Plume tucked its head under a wing, drew in its claws, and curled into a fluffy black ball against me. All 3 of us slept while the dense rain came down and the plants drank it in, a tag of accelerated growth flickering up here and there. And outside the yard, something moved through the dark. The red great snake, back from patrol and half a mind to rest, caught on its return a scent it loathed up on the mountain. And it went straight up the slope, tearing to the summit, the rocks and trees it passed shattering into nothing behind it. At the top it fixed on a black python easing toward the spring's waterhole, and in a foul temper it loosed a ranged attack outright, slicing the python's head clean off before its mouth gaped and a vast suction dragged head and body down its throat hole. Having swallowed the rule breaker, the red great snake circled the mountain to look it over, since this was ground it had claimed, and eating that python taught it that not every creature grasped the idea of territory at all. Some simply appeared, lacking brains and even the basic instincts of their kind, running on greed and wrecking everything in reach. One such fellow, near its own strength, had passed through on the second day after its human neighbor turned up and helped itself to the snake's food, leaving only some information behind as payment. Fragile creatures were popping into being all over now, their strength all across the map, but by the reckoning of the great snake and that bird, every one of them desperately frail, plants too springing up at certain hours, and the mountain spring itself a thing that hadn't existed before. From summit to foot the red great snake wound down, sliding into the rift canyon and diving beneath an ultra-wide river that lay calm on its surface, while the rain kept falling and reshaping the mountain, surfacing tagged ore and pooling soil into the hollows. Time crept on until 9 in the morning, when a refresh wave broke over the rain-worked mountain, and the sky brightened at once, even though the day stayed gray and wet. I slept until past 9 before I finally surfaced. A check of my panel got me out of bed in fine spirits. My energy cap past 230 now, my stamina cap over 290 with 300 plus stored, combat power 26, and 300 odd survival points to my name. I told them good morning and said I'd head out and check first, this rain refusing to stop, since I wondered whether something had gone wrong over by the mountain spring. Out in the courtyard, I looked at the Chinese rose, its tag reading 37 hours to maturation, patted its leaves and worked plant communication technique to say hello. And after 10 odd seconds, only 2 prompts surfaced, the mood up another 2 to 4, and a fertilizer requirement. The requirement read mineral-based, when I'd always taken this rose for a meat eater, so I needed to ask more often, except I couldn't afford mineral fertilizers just then. The varieties ran more tangled than the rest, the search throwing up gold, silver, copper, iron, and on down the list. The fertilizer maker wanting 5 portions of material plus 50 energy or 250 survival points to process it, and the ores all running expensive. I called good morning to the 2 of them and asked Crescent Moon what it was playing at as I went to check on my busy little fellows. Dark Plume hopped about rummaging the vines and snatching a bug, the hard-working bird at work while the restless snake rolled and wallowed in the idle plot, the soft soil soaked by rain and churned to a muddy slop. The bird swallowed its bug, flapped onto my shoulder and laughed at the mud-caked snake. Since the master hadn't woken, they couldn't leave the yard, so the snake had wanted a puddle to wallow in and instead caked mud all down its scales. I told them I didn't quite get it, but he seemed to be having a fine time, and since we were eating, soon we'd take a bath first. Crescent Moon wouldn't budge from the slush, so I walked over, pointed toward the mountain spring, and called it along. Since the snake loved water and I couldn't let it out at night, maybe after breakfast I'd dig a big pit and rig a simple pool, though I couldn't yet say whether one I dug myself would even hold water. Crescent Moon knew its muddy state was no fit condition for clinging to me, but past the courtyard wall it still nudged its head a little closer. I told it was fine, just mud, it would wash off. Then something up ahead caught my eye. I patted the snake's head and swept my gaze around, the ground diagonally ahead looking oddly off. So I walked over and found a label reading the spot as collectible soil. Soil, then. I dug a tentative handful of the slush, and to my surprise the mud didn't run away, so I ladled it two-handed into a bucket until it reached a full portion's worth and the soil label snapped onto it. It went straight into the inventory, where it turned back into loose soil and left only a thin film of rainwater that didn't count. I told them we'd go, bath first, then treasure chests and more of this. The family of 3 reached the pool, Crescent Moon plunging into play and Dark Plume diving after for a few laps. I sat by the edge, played with the snake, then called them off, since we ought to be eating breakfast, but my survival points stretched to 1 portion of meat, and unless I turned up resources the 2 of them would be eating vegetables alongside me. Dark Plume flicked the rainwater off, lifted into the rain, sat down, and chirped toward a direction where the square box its master liked sat waiting. I said our Dark Plume had already learned to find treasure chests, and after a 2-minute walk that way I came on a chest rocking in the current. It gave 5 units of white soil, 2 of green wood, and 2 bread, a fine little chest. The wood the better grade besides. Pleased I was happy with the chest, Dark Plume swept a wider circle and doubled back to hurry me along. 10 minutes later I opened my second of the day to find an equipment piece, 15 units of white wood, and 1 water. A fine drop. I'd only brought 2 buckets out and still had empty inventory slots, and since Dark Plume was every bit as hooked on chests as I wasn't heading home yet. On the way I turned up another label, a level 1 ore pile, darker stones salted through a heap of crushed rock. Crescent Moon, trailing along a little glum after the bird had ribbed it for only knowing how to play, opened its mouth at the rock the moment it saw my curiosity. It wasn't fool enough to bite stone, but it could attack it the way it had broken trees before, so its master wouldn't have to swing a tool to crack the pile. I read its intent and told it to try, then stepped back to watch, while Dark Plume flapped back to my shoulder and stared at the snake and the rock, plainly unsure what was going on. Crescent Moon skipped Spaceblade altogether, circled the rock twice, then swung its tail and shattered the ore pile outright. So much for the pampered snake. I was genuinely stunned, knowing well enough that a combat power gain meant body and spirit both strengthened, but never having expected it to crack rock with a swing of its tail. Days out of the egg, and already breaking stone. The shatter left a few tagged collectibles, a unit each of white copper, iron, and stone, and 2 of gray crushed stone. I picked them up and squatted to stroke the snake's tail and check its scales, since for all its growth it was still a little fellow only days out of the egg. Crescent Moon wagged its tail at Dark Plume in triumph, and the bird, stunned at being called the clumsy one, fluttered off east urging me that way, bent on proving who the truly clumsy one was. I followed the heading, listening to the 2 of them bicker, and even understanding none of it I couldn't help being cheered. Reaching the east side, as I made to go down, Dark Plume flapped up and stopped me, and Crescent Moon blocked my front too, so I told them I'd stand there and wait for them to call before coming over, pointing at my feet and holding still. The east was a crushed stone slope, no material labels visible from where I stood, but ore enough sure to be down there. Satisfied I wouldn't push ahead, Crescent Moon circled me twice and rested its head on my arm, while Dark Plume beat its wings forward, flew a circle, and dropped a thunderball onto the ground, which the next moment burst crackling and laid lightning across a small patch. The skill name was spot on. A thunderball that explodes, thunderburst ball, apt indeed. The bird flew back, landed in my raised palm, and rubbed its head at my chest, worn out, one thunderball spending it. I told it to rest and asked whether I could go over now. Crescent Moon dropped its guard and came along beside me as I started forward. In walking down the crushed stone slope, I told the bird its attack range really was large. I found a crushed stone field maybe 400 or 500 meters across, scattered labels everywhere. Gray crushed stone was the most plentiful, good only for paving the homestead and carrying no enhancement. But there was level 1 ore in plenty too. White stone and iron and copper by the score, a few of silver and 1 a piece of gold, adamantite and refined iron. I told them we'd head home first, sell some materials to buy food, then come back out, and I called a halt since it was already past 9:30 and any more delay would push into the afternoon. Man and snake turned and walked home. Home again. I pulled off my equipment and hung it by the window to drain, then went to the fertilizer maker, fed in 5 portions of copper ore for 1 portion of copper ore fertilizer, and searched the auction. The dearest thing in my inventory was the adamantite. The top bid on white quality level 1 adamantite near 5,700 survival points, and the consignment floor just above it, with plenty stacked. I listed mine a hair under the floor and it sold the instant it went up, leaving me over 1,000 even after 10 odd portions of meat. I sliced the meat onto a plate, cut some for myself, added water and salt to the pot, and cooked a meat slice and vegetable soup. About 10 minutes on, breakfast was ready, and I scooped a portion to the table while the copper ore fertilizer in the fertilizer maker, long since done, came out as a little knot of ore powder wrapped in an air layer. I went out, dug a small pit in the Chinese roses pot, and poured the ore fertilizers in, no need to water with the rain still coming down. Then I checked my energy, recovered past 200, and planned to run the communication skill and chat with the rose to learn what else it lacked. The skill bled off, and after a run the notices surfaced. The rose's mood up 5 to 19. The panel again noting the mutated consciousness wasn't yet born, so the mood effects stayed weak. Then came a less welcome line, that the rose had been disturbed repeatedly through its nutritional recovery period, its thorn hardness raised. I opened the panel to be sure I'd read it right. Repeatedly disturbed, recovery period. Fine, my chatting was too frequent, so I'd let it rest, though on the bright side, even put out it had only hardened its thorns and hadn't dropped its mood, so the rose didn't hold my talkativeness against me. I told them there was no rush on the planting tasks, that we'd gather ore today, and as I sat to eat I watched the chat channel turn livelier and decided I ought to bank more money. Today it wasn't just my patch that had grown gatherable soil and ore, but the ground near every farming, breeding, and crafting player's home. Fresh resources cropping up all over. The channel had spun into an argument, a gathering player calling the bloom a virtuous cycle that kept more players alive while others snapped back that it was plain greed, gathering already pulling higher quality and still wanting the wilds to itself. Around they went. Non-gathering players griped that the profession only ever pulled the great quality scraps, while gathering hoarded the good yields, and the gathering crowd shot back that they braved greater danger and only got lectured now that prices had dropped. Then the handle started ganging up and cheering each other on, the thread tilting off into who was tycoon and who was small fry. Players daring anyone numbered a flat 100,000 to speak up, the whole thing drifting somewhere strange. As for me, breakfast eaten and heading out. I caught a friend request from a player, the note attached saying he didn't know my race but was adding me anyway, that we could chat when free. I wondered whether he was just trawling IDs to add. Plenty of players had indeed jumped on the game of hunting down the ID, on the far side to friend, the far side player being whoever held the ID of 100,001 minus your own. Others were tossing out the idea of friending adjacent IDs, or taking your own number as a base and adding or subtracting at random, and the channel was lively with it. I accepted the request, and the moment I did, 3 messages landed in a row. The sender greeted me twice over, then asked, politely, what race I was, since he was human and didn't know much about the others, and wanted to head off any unpleasantness. Then he introduced himself as Peng, male, a breeding profession player with a soft little cat and dog at home, both very cute fellows. A chatterbox, this one. With a smile, I set a nickname for him and trimmed my own ID number down to size. Glad enough to have someone to talk to in the downtime, like an online friend from before. I wrote back that I was Yi Wu, male, human, farming profession, with a snake and a bird at home, both very cute, matching what he'd offered. He came back that being human was good, being human was great. Not that he looked down on other races, only that the same race chatted more easily. Then he asked whether my snake and bird fought, since his cat and dog were 5 days hatched and still bit at each other on sight, which had him setting 2 single beds in the house to keep them apart so they'd sleep in peace. His talk swung straight to the little animals at home, cats and dogs scrapping being normal enough, and I answered that mine didn't fight. They only bickered once they were out, probably squabbling over who did more for the household. I sent it, closed the chat, and looked at my 2 little fellows, who got along just fine, Crescent Moon crushing ore with its tail and Dark Plume seizing the scattered pieces and flying them over to drop beside me. While they split the gathering, I sat on the open ground, drank a stamina enhancement potion, and worked my cultivation, the dose sitting calmer and the gains rising the higher my stamina limit climbed. By 4 I called the 2 of them home, the 3 of us out since the morning meal, the pair gathering while I held a pace of 1 potion an hour, stopping to rest and to collect and sell ore, then shifting to fresh patches. The endless rain did nothing worse than force me out of my shirt and pants, and I caught no cold for it. After 6 potions in my own cultivation, my stamina cap stood past 460, my combat power 34, my survival points now over 125,000. My inventory ran 10 slots deep with the survival manual, 3 dozen potions, a bread and a water, wood white and green, hundreds of units of gravel and stone, and 20 each of iron and copper ore. The snake and bird had gathered across different spots and moved most of the valuable goods off, while I kept only the non-tradable gravel and the level 1 building stone and held the leftover iron and copper as spare material. Refined gold and refined iron came out truly thin, only that first lucky pair and a single extra refined iron since. I told them to go play while I saw if I could finish the day's task, and back home I worked the skill at the Chinese rose 10 seconds with no answer, then took up the hoe and went to the field I'd cultivated before. Today's task was land reclamation, and though this was worked ground already, Crescent Moon had wallowed it that morning and it had reverted to a derelict state, so reorganizing it counted all the same. Rainwater ran over the soaked plot as I leveled it bit by bit, the progress creeping up, and after more than half an hour the task came clear. 200 survival points and a planting gift pack, which opened to a level 1 water channel crafting blueprint. The water channel looked useful, the build calling for white quality level 1 stone, of which I had plenty against the 3 it needed, each section a meter long and a third deep, able to tie into level 1 water source points. I didn't want it for irrigation, but for the pool, since with a water channel I could skip hauling from the mountain spring and only had to work out how to make the pool hold water. I checked the time, near 5, and figured I'd eat first and keep at it after dark. I went in to make dinner, heating my own food, cutting meat onto plates for Crescent Moon and Dark Plume, and not forgetting a portion of meat fertilizer for the Chinese rose, since the growth ran slightly faster after a meat feeding even when it didn't ask. Peng pinged me as soon as night fell, asking plainly whether I'd eaten, and I wrote that I was eating and asked him the same, not really sure what to talk about with him, but figuring dark was the hour for small talk. He said he'd eaten too, out for several hours that day, and only 2 rabbits to show for it, not a single wilderness chest, super miserable, though the 2 rabbits scraped together a meal for the cat and dog. He lamented how hard life ran while quietly showing off that he could keep his household fed. I just asked whether 2 rabbits were really enough, whether the rabbits were that big, genuinely curious, since my Dark Plume put away 4 pounds a meal after 1 evolution, and Crescent Moon took 20 or 30 pounds. Peng shot back asking with a heavy heart whether my snake and bird really ate that much, when 2 rabbits ran over 10 pounds and I wrote it was just about 30 pounds a meal. He came back asking per meal how many times a day I fed them, since a snake should stay full a long while after 1 feed. I answered that its activity ran high and it simply liked to eat, then went on eating in a fine mood. I seemed to be raising the snake well enough so far. Crescent Moon swallowed a chunk of meat, leaned closer, and rubbed at my wrist, pleased the master had watched it the whole time. I rubbed my hand along its scales and told it to eat up, that once it was full I'd dig the pool tonight and find out only after whether it would hold water. About 10 minutes on, Peng wrote back that he'd plated a few portions of meat and watched the cat and dog actually eat it, that he couldn't believe he'd been underfeeding them all this time. Raising fluff balls clearly not something you did casually, the money pressure ratcheting up again. I told him my household wasn't so stressed, digging a hole out front as I typed, the two little fellows earning more than I did, while I spent my time on land reclamation and planting and cultivation. Basically the family's lucky mascot when I went out. I wanted to make the point that non-combat players like us didn't have to shoulder everything alone, though that held only for weak players like me, since a strong one could put in the work himself. It held water, some natural loss aside, and I told the snake to shift over so I could widen the hole, digging on in high spirits as Crescent Moon watched from the side. The sky had long gone dark, the little light leaking through the doors useless with nothing lit outside, so I rested and opened them all. A level 1 flame tower ran 9,000 survival points and stayed lit even in rain. I bought it, set it on the open ground beside the house, fed it 130 pieces of level 1 wood, and set it to a burn that would snuff itself at dawn. A square meter and 3 meters tall, it lit and died on its own with the night, throwing light across a 10-meter radius off a high point, wind and rainproof where a campfire wasn't. The rain kept falling while orange-red firelight spilled through its sides. I was well pleased. That would do, and I swung the hoe back into the half-meter hole, which needed depth for a growing snake, 1.5 meters at least, and width besides, so I dug as much as I could until my muscles ached. After better than an hour, my stamina dropped to single digits, so I called a break. I climbed out, poured a bucket over myself to wash off the mud, then stood by the campfire until I was mostly dry and lay down to rest, the plan to sleep a bit and pick it up again on waking. With my stamina cap raised, both my strength at the work and the time I could hold it had grown a great deal. I told them it was time to sleep, that they could play but not leave the yard, and I patted the snake's head where it had climbed onto the bed, speaking to them naturally even knowing they couldn't follow. I shut my eyes and started concentration cultivation technique, the door wide open, firelight flickering inside and out, and after I dropped off, Dark Plume came in and curled by the pillow while Crescent Moon took one more patrol of the yard before coiling into a ball on the other side. The moderate rain ran till midnight and stopped on the instant the hour struck. The sound of rain gone, the sudden silence woke me in the dead middle of the night. A check showed today a clear one, the 8th day, sunny, the task to plant 50 level 1 crops for 500 survival points, and a planting gift pack. A steep quota. My energy cap had reached 298, energy and stamina both fully restored beside the limit gain. It was time to get up and work, and weighing modification against communication I decided not to overthink it, and would chat with the Rose, whose tag read accelerating growth, maturity in 4 hours. At the door I looked at the Rose so near maturity now that everything else had to wait. I leaned to the wooden wall, touched the rose's thick leaves, and worked communication to read its needs, the energy dropping 10 at a time until after nearly 20 casts a prompt came that it needed a large stretch of open ground for its roots, not a planting field. My field still had 200 square meters unplanted, but the rose wanted open ground, so I'd have to carry the pot to the backyard. I remarked on its size as I lifted it, the rose standing over 3 meters with more than 10 main stems. Surely several hundred pounds, lucky my stamina had been worked up so hard, or I might not have shifted it. Setting it down, I dug a hole fast, the roots too many and far grown to dig free, so I broke the pot and lowered roots and soil together into the hole. The rose answered quick, its mood surging 20 to 57 with its roots loosed, though it was about to run dry on nutrients, its branch and leaf growth speeding up, with a note to mind the feeding. Energy near spent, I sat beside the rose to cultivate rather than sleep, since that raised the cap and quickened recovery. And once I had 60 or 70 energy, I'd chat again. Round and round it went. Cultivate, spend, cultivate more, near 2 hours, until new information surfaced on the rose's tag that it had entered the maturity stage with its nutrition short. 3 percentages laid out, flesh and blood at 29, or at 25, vegetation at 59. Not fertilizer, but flesh and blood directly. Then I bought a skinned rabbit and threw it down, where the soil stirred and roots speared it and churned it back under. The flesh and blood up to 35. It took, and after testing a few sorts I found whole animals with bones nudged the figure higher, so I bought larger ones until the flesh and blood ran near full at 98. Then I moved to minerals, the 35 units on hand dragged under at once, and just bought and bought, the 100,000 plus survival points I'd banked dropping fast though the rose did need to excess. By the time I'd fed it ores and large medicinal herbs in all 3 categories hit full, I had 11,000 and change left. The system declared the nutrition sufficient and the evolution begun. The rose's spiritual consciousness entering the spirit transformation stage at a danger level of extreme. Its mood climbing 3 then 5 more to 65. Then came a line I hadn't braced for. Its roots growing. A level 1 cucumber devoured. Then a level 1 tomato devoured. I asked it that if it was hungry it should tell me, not eat the vegetables. I hadn't taken that extreme danger to heart at first, since the rose's roots and branches had bent around people and buildings on their own before. But now it was eating my planted crops, and not the mature produce either. The whole plant swallowed root and stem-facing flower. Just as a loss had started to sting, the prompt set me at ease. The eating actually did something. Then it was fine. I told it to eat away so long as there was a benefit and it didn't eat people or snake or bird. The notices kept refreshing, every crop in my field caught and unable to flee, until after one feeding frenzy the field was cleared clean. Then the rose turned on the flower pots, only this time it didn't eat them outright but waved a branch and pointed toward the front of the house. I told it I'd go see what it wanted and give it all over, patting the branch and walking around front. Its branches had sprawled several hundred square meters behind the house and reached an absurd 10 meters and more. All to the good since the rose held no ill will and clung close to me. The bigger and stronger the better. I told it the pot of peony was its to eat, pulling the level 1 peony free and setting it down, since I only cared for the plants with spiritual consciousness, the rest just stocked to sell or use. Peony, honeysuckle, sunflower, orchid, another peony, and as the last was dragged under and eaten, the rose took a new spiritual form, wealth and prosperity, and now not a plant was left in the house. I told it there was nothing left at home and asked what else it wanted to eat, putting down the empty pot, patting the branch that came near, and working communication to ask whether it needed more. A voice telling me to go in sounded at my ear, the branch easing closer and nudging me toward the house. I told it I'd go in and not watch, that it should rest if it was tired, and let me know what else it needed once the evolution was done. I patted the branch, stepped inside smiling, and shut the simple wooden windows and door under the rose's urging. As I closed off my view of the outside, fresh rose sprouts pushed up all over the yard, and but for the house, the flame tower, and the well, every other spot was covered by the dense packed rose branches. The new buds rose higher and higher, blotting out the last of the yard's light, climbing until the growth hit some critical point and the vitality dissipated in an instant, the leaves and branches withering to dust in a flash. The 30 by 30 yard went suddenly quiet and clean, only dust drifting down on the wind. The quiet held several minutes, then a small mound of dirt bulged before the house door. The mound broke, and a tiny sprout poked through, 2 small leaves unfurling and a branch shooting up. When it reached about 20 centimeters, it threw out several larger leaves, fresh branches growing off them, and as the branches thickened, each grew 2 heavy leaf blades. A flower bud formed atop the main stem, and then this rose that didn't look like a rose made a very distinct head-turning sweep of a look around. Having fixed on a direction, the leaves on the 2 branches shook, trying a few adjustments, then it bent to pat the ground, the leaves its hands and the main stem its body, and after pressing its leaves down it pulled its roots free of the soil. Feeling something still off, the white roots wriggled and twisted, splitting for a moment into 2 parts like a person trying to take a few steps, then twisting together and stretching long to mimic a snake's slither. Back and forth it tried, until at last it chose the human-like shape, stood up on its 2 small legs, and raised a hand to pat at the wooden door. I stood just inside the bedroom door and read the little fellow's information again, since I'd already seen most of it while the rose was working through its transformation. The panel called it a spiritualized creature, still unnamed, level 1, growing on its own or through special feeding, combat power 99, with a mood value pinned at a full 100. The system warned me the mood affected the spirit's temper and energy, that there was no ceiling on it, but that if it ever sank too low, the creature might run off or start wrecking things. Its status reads spiritualization in humanoid form, its attributes devour and gluttony, its skills growth and regeneration, and below that sat 4 spiritualized forms it could shift between, each with its own use. The humanoid form let it mimic a person, move, and talk consciously with animals and plants at 1/10 of its combat power. The thorn forest was the opposite, a dense immobile wall of rose that hit between full strength and double. The sun-facing flower grew at random inside a radius and sped the growth of every plant within it, scaling to the sun, while the wealth and prosperity form spread through a planting field and lifted both the output and the mutation chance of the crops inside it. Move, talk, fight, and support, the thing could do all of it. A genuinely all-around little fellow. 3 soft pats landed on the wooden door, shaking me loose from the panel. I reached out and opened it, looked down, and went still for a second before I squatted and held out my hand with a grin. I'd known the humanoid form would come out small, but this was small past all reason, the whole of it standing under half a meter. I told it I figured it must be hungry again, and it answered straight into my head that it wasn't, that it had already eaten everything in the house. It lifted one little leg, walked into my hand, and once I scooped it up, its roots loosened, and it settled into my palm like a child taking a seat, shaking its head between its 2 leaves. Unstable before, it had eaten anything edible it could reach, understanding only after the transformation that it had cleared out every plant in the house, yet it still knew those plants were ones I'd grown by hand. I told it to wait for dawn and we'd plant more, that so long as the crops were our own and carried no spiritual consciousness, it could eat whatever it liked, and that if they ran out, I'd just buy more seeds. I carried it to the bedside, pinching its leaves as I explained what our homegrown crops were worth, that anything without a consciousness was just material, and whether it ate them growing or I harvested them ripe came to the same thing. I added that if there was ever something it shouldn't eat, I'd say so, since a nursery field, if I built one next, would need protecting. It answered that it understood and wouldn't eat anything off limits, swayed both leaves, and pressed them to my wrist now that it knew I wasn't angry. It wouldn't cause trouble, it told me. It could even watch the house. I said that was good, and that since it could take so many shapes, I'd name it for what it was, calling it All Spirits, the spirit of 10,000 changes, certain this little fellow would never settle into one fixed form. It liked the name, the real reason being that having one let it go introduce itself to its little companions. It asked in a rush whether it could say hello to them, promising it wouldn't hurt them, that they were so small it only wanted to know them better, and I told it to go play, that compared to its other form they really were small. I let it off, and Crescent Moon and Dark Plume were huddled at the inner side of the bed, the size gap a thing to see, the snake grown a great deal yet still no match for a dozens of meters tall rose that could fill a 900 square meter courtyard when it spread. All Spirits slithered toward the snake with its roots twisted, copying a crawl, and Crescent Moon brought its head down and opened its mouth right at it. The thing was plainly a plant, yet it kept mimicking people one moment and snakes the next. And I told it that since it learned so fast, it might as well learn to fly like Dark Plume. It turned back wounded, waved its two leaves, and pointed at the snake. Was it being snubbed? I told them none of them looked ready to sleep, so they could play in the courtyard while I dug the pond. And I gathered all three, holding the snake by the head while its body coiled around me, carried them out, and set them down, patting the snake, stroking feathers, pinching the leaves that leaned in. Coaxing settled, I picked up the reclamation hoe and went back to the pit. The hole I'd dug before was still there, and with the rain stopped, the soil dried fast enough that I wouldn't end up caked in mud the way I had the first time. While I worked, All Spirits and Crescent Moon went on bickering, Dark Plume off to the side enjoying the show, every so often spreading its wings to swat the snake, and then the leaves. After better than an hour, my stamina, mostly recovered, hit bottom again, but the size of the pit pleased me, about 1.5 meters deep and 10 across, a rough circle with ragged edges. Enough for now. I climbed out and stretched flat beside it to rest, and I told the snake that came sliding over to go check whether the size suited it. Before this, they'd only ever read each other through movement and tone, but with All Spirits handling the translating, they could trade actual information now. Crescent Moon wriggled down into the pit, stretched out, looped around a few times, then came back and buried its head in my hand. It was even bigger than that puddle, it said. It was fun. I told them we'd clean up and get back to sleep, that when I woke I'd line the bottom with crushed stone. Once All Spirits passed the snake's verdict to me, I confirmed the size was good, stood, took out a bucket of water for a quick rinse, and went in to lie down. It was already past 4, with 3 good hours of sleep left. After I started concentration cultivation technique and dropped off, the 3 didn't come back inside. They chatted a while, and then tiny All Spirits ran to the door to make sure I was asleep before wriggling back into the pit, pressing its roots to the edges and growing. The clumsy snake loved water, so it meant to widen the pit a little as a present. Only the digging looked ungraceful and it didn't want to be seen at it while I was around. Morning came back gray and bright. I woke a little after 8:30, greeted the 3 where they lay by the bed staring at me, and went down the line with a pat each before I got up, geared up, and made breakfast. I boiled vegetables for myself, while the snake and the bird ate meat and the plant, it turned out, also ate meat. All Spirits told me it liked meat straight, so the fertilizer machine got set aside for the moment, though not uselessly, since I'd keep planting and modifying, and there'd always be more that needed feeding. I divided the food and talked through the day's plan as I ate, since the pit it had dug in the small hours ran big and we'd need a great deal of crushed stone. The big plate held chunks of meat for the snake, the small bowl shredded meat for Dark Plume. I took a flower pot, put soil in it, set All Spirits inside, and dropped the chunks on top, where the white roots churned the soil and dragged the meat under to eat. Im punged me then with his usual morning greeting, asking whether I'd had breakfast, brother. I wrote back that I was eating now and asked if he had, and he told me he always ate before dawn and waited for daylight on a full stomach, then ran his yard tasks and headed out the moment it lightened. He went on that his big dog could find treasure, that it actually turned up chests for him, far better at it than players. He admitted he'd been so reluctant to bring his little fellows out, keeping them in his arms even when he did, scared they'd get lost or hurt, and only today had he realized their survival skills ran circles around his own. The messages came one stacked on the next. A real chatterbox, this one. He sent 3 in the time it took me to feed All Spirits 2 more portions, and the joy practically came off the words. I wrote that I'd just cut some meat for the little fellows, that it was only natural for them to outdo players, since humans rarely understood wilderness survival, then sat back to eat. I'd always believed a person ought to know himself and save effort where he could. Back when Crescent Moon could find treasure chests, I let it find them. When Dark Plume could fly, I let it scout. And when I learned the snake could break level 1 ore piles without a scratch, I handed the gathering to it. After I fell asleep, All Spirits had widened my pit by a whole circle on its own, so next time I'd ask it first whether it felt like digging. After breakfast, I held the flower pot in one hand, poked All Spirits' leaves, and took it out to play. The small form could be carried bare, but it was a plant in the end, and when it didn't feel like playing, it would rather sit in soil. Dark Plume stood by the pot rubbing its fluffy head against a flower, telling All Spirits about all the fun it had run into, while Crescent Moon stayed at my side with its head on my arm and its body sliding along the ground. Clumsy bird, clumsy spirit, the whole lot of them clumsy little ones. At the water pit by the mountain spring, I looked over the tags inside it and confirmed the powerful neighbor had visited again and left me a treasure chest. All spirits passed along Crescent Moon's read of it, that the place smelled of snake, that the neighbor was a very strong one. A snake then. That was fine, maybe I really did have an affinity with snakes. I set the pot by the water, stripped off my gear, and slid in for a soak, smiling as I counted it up. One crisis that had come from a snake, the first companion at my side a snake, and now the neighbor leaving me chests a snake too. All spirits translated something, and Crescent Moon rested its head on my shoulder, telling me the snake loved its master very much. I asked if it was really that happy, never hearing what all spirits had actually relayed, only guessing I'd claimed a fondness for snakes and the snake had come to fuss. All spirits floated in from the water's edge, looking put out, patted the chest tag with a leaf, and called Crescent Moon far too clingy, and the snake's tail patted the leaf right back, reminding it the master himself had said it. Dark Plume looked the two over, threw open its wings and flew off, deciding both were idiots and it would scout for any chests its master liked. It rose and dropped at once, pointing straight down below the mountain spring, where a chest waited a cleaner one than yesterday's. I asked whether it was a level 2 treasure chest, and having already pulled the leftover material fragments from the bottom of the water, I climbed out, geared up, and walked over with a little excitement. It was close, only 300 meters off, and once I rounded a few trees I found it. A level 2 treasure chest turning in the stream that ran down from the mountain spring. I opened it and it gave up a great haul. A level 2 house upgrade blueprint. A level 1 heart condensing orb crafting recipe. 5 white quality level 1 fooling seeds. And 2 green quality level 1 copper ingots. A blueprint and a recipe alongside materials and semi-finished goods. A level 2 house. I had a new goal. I searched the prices on what I'd pulled, then sat down on a nearby stone in fine spirits and gathered all 3 little fellows in for a kiss apiece. The take from that wild level 2 chest was excellent. I checked the auction first. The level 2 house upgrade blueprint sat past 106,000 survival points with 8 minutes on the clock, more than 1,000 listed and still climbing, while the heart condensing orb recipe ran past 219,000 with only 3 copies up and 2 minutes left. The blueprint was dear because everyone needed to upgrade and the things were scarce. The recipe dear because the weapon it made came with a skill. The recipe called for steep materials. A unit of heart condensing crystal and 10 each of bitter bamboo heart and gold sand, all blue quality or above, for a finished weapon of blue quality or above that would always carry an energy draining skill. That guaranteed skill was the whole draw, since the mall sold a skill for 10,000 survival points but only once per player and only one tied to your profession, while a skill bolted onto a weapon was as good as certain to be an attack type. I kept the house upgrade blueprint and listed the weapon recipe straight onto the auction, since I wasn't a crafting player and anything I made would come out basic with no room to advance. And as more players opened recipes, the price would only fall, so I moved while it was hot. The moment I listed it, a player jumped it, and when I refreshed, the one nearest its end had climbed to 250,000, then 260, the 4 copies all rising together. I'd set mine for 30 minutes, so it ranked second to close, and soon the one with least time hit 0. And because these auctions ended right on the clock, only seller and buyer would ever know that last bid. I stood up pleased and walked east with the flower pot toward the crushed stone slope where ore respawned, set the pot down for company, and let Crescent Moon and Dark Plume run off to hunt ore piles. As the weakest one in the household, I found a flat spot, drank a stamina enhancement potion, and went on cultivating since the stamina cap only climbed through dedicated cultivation or potions, and the work paired with nothing else. Dark Plume hauled a piece of ore over to greet all spirits, then flew off to bring back every shard Crescent Moon had knocked loose. The cultivation ran past 20 minutes, and with my stamina cap over 500 a single potion now absorbed clean in 20. Once my auction listing closed, I collected the take. The recipe sold for over 355,000. A handling fee skimmed off, leaving me a little under 320,000 to withdraw. I checked my inventory, compared the auction and exchange prices, and listed the level 3 eagle feather fragment I'd pulled from the puddle on the exchange. Not precious, but good for 10,000. And with the scraps added, I could scrape together 100,000. I listed everything 1 survival point under the floor. It converted fast, and I sat at a total over 431,000. A fat sum against level 1 prices, but nowhere near a level 2 house. The upgrade wanted the blueprint, the existing level 1 house, 1,000 units each of level 2 wood and stone, 200 of level 2 iron ore, and 10 of level 2 glass, for a 60 square meter wooden house with a 10% recovery boost, 100 defense, and 10,000 durability. Most players could only gather level 1 right now, and level 2 stock in the market came to less than a 10,000th of level 1. Worse, because level 1 came straight from the mall while level 2 only came from player production. The price so high I shelved the idea. I'd have to wait until level 2 flooded the collection areas or players worked out how to synthesize it from level 1. I told the little fellows good work, closed the trading interface, squatted to collect the ore by the pot, gathered the flower and the bird, and shifted to the next patch, where I opened the chat channel, drank another potion, and went on cultivating. The channel was busy. A player crowed about casting heal on a hurt wild creature, only for the creature to walk over on its own and let itself be taken home, while another warned that tamed pets could turn on you, and a third argued that heal hardly counted as taming when taming meant beating and starving a beast into submission. Someone asked whether anyone had found items to upgrade skills, since the skills carried level tags but no experience bar and no upgrade item anywhere. And another answered that pet skills at least improved on their own through pet evolution, each upgrade leaving them far stronger. A player who'd opened a level 2 chest reported pulling a home servant, saying its strength climbed almost like a player's, that it could cultivate, learn skills, and take strengthening potions, but that its eyes looked bad and it couldn't speak or show feeling, only follow orders. That set the channel off. Servants, people remembered, were what players turned into after death, conscious but unable to control themselves, and the player with the servant said its eyes did leak emotion, that his own brimmed with resentment, and that the more he told it to calm down and promised not to torture it, the fiercer the look got. Others told him to watch his safety in case it killed him one day, and a few mentioned that a servant cultivated to 10,000 combat power could be revived by the master spending survival points, regaining its player identity, which set the rest scoffing that no fool would raise a servant only to hand back its freedom. Then someone countered that a clever one might play devoted with its eyes the way a pretty creature would, just long enough to be revived and turn on its owner. Servant, resurrection. Once the potion ran out, I stopped and sat to rest. I still remembered the early word on what players became after death. Non-player creatures conscious but uncontrolled, with a chance at 3 fates: a wild creature, a farmed creature, or a home servant. At the time, I'd taken it for a soul or body put back to use, but now, was there really a chance at resurrection? Crescent moon, done with the surrounding ore piles, burrowed into my arms, and I asked if it was tired, and told it we'd go home, tidy up, do some reclamation and planting, and pave the bottom and edges of the pool with crushed stone. I held the fussing snake and stroked its head, and whatever the channel had stirred up drained off. Player or dead player, anything wearing a tag I'd never give my resources. So there was no use chewing on it. Home then, back to honest labor. Dark Plume came down on my shoulder to rub at my face, and all spirits shook its flower and said it wanted to go home. I carried the pot in one hand and patted the snake with the other, and walked for the mountaintop. Inside the fenced yard I set the pot down, and all spirits pulled its legs from the soil, gripped the rim like a child taking stairs, stepped down, clapped its leaves, and ran off to play with Crescent Moon. I called after the flower and the snake that the pool was already big enough and not to expand it for now, that once I'd planted 50 crops I'd come pave it with crushed stone. Playing was fine, but they didn't need to do the work, and a few more digs from them and I might have to enlarge the yard, which the cheap level 1 fence hardly warranted at the current size. Impung pinged me at noon, in a low mood from the chat channel, asking whether I'd seen the talk about players changing identity after death, the guessing over whether pets might be players too. He thought it absurd, since the little fellows hatched from pet eggs couldn't possibly be players. I was paving the pool bottom with crushed stone, so I switched over, flipped through it, and wrote back that those messages all came from players, and that unless we'd witnessed it ourselves, we couldn't take any of it as truth. I added that everything in this world ran in data, and that rather than fretting over whether the panel could lie the way some players insisted, he'd do better asking whether he held that kind of value himself. I told him to just glance at it and not let it touch his normal life, that I'd dug a big pool at home and meant to pave it and run the well water in so the little ones could play. Since he was my only friend, and we got on especially over showing off our little animals, I grumbled a bit and then took the chance to show off my own small construction project. He asked whether mine was a water snake, then said his 2 little fellows liked jumping in water buckets too, that maybe he should dig them a pool when it got dark, and wondered whether you could store water in a yard pit without a blueprint recipe. Talk of a play spot for his little fellows pulled him off the death business, and as we sorted out that a stable water source was all a pool really needed, he turned over fresh ideas, whether he could build a rockery in the yard and raise a garden. I lined the pool bottom with gravel, packed the soil firm around it, moved the well in close, and laid 2 sections of water channel to tie them together so the well's stored water would feed the pool on its own. The well held only so much though, so I poured in every bucket of mountain spring water I'd carried back, and went out for more, a dozen round trips before I managed a thin film across the bottom. Crescent Moon slid down the edge, swam 2 laps, and lifted its head at me, saying the home water pit was fun to play in. I told it to have its fun, that I'd treat the hauling as exercise, and left Crescent Moon and all spirits home while I took Dark Plume back out, fetching from the pit below the mountain spring trip after trip, until by near dark the pool stood over 50 centimeters deep. After that I tidied the fields and bought 50 level 1 chive seeds to plant, since chives grew fast and ran the most harvests of anything in the mall. The daily task cleared at 50 of 50, paying 500 survival points and a gift pack that opened to 10 white quality level 1 pine tree seeds. I'd spent over 4,900 on seeds and gotten back 500 plus tree seeds the mall didn't even sell. The first production type tree seeds I'd seen, where before it had always been vegetables, grains, or medicinal herbs. I looked at the little patch of chives, not sprouted yet but planted at last, and told everyone it was almost dark and time to eat. All spirits, out of its pot the moment we got home, ran for the door on its short root legs crying that it wanted to eat. Crescent Moon watched the show off and grumbled that it was still the same idiot that overate even without a consciousness. Dark Plume flew to my shoulder, tilted its head and wondered whether the snake even hurt itself, since all spirits had only overeaten back then for want of a consciousness, and now that it had won it knew when it was full and could hold itself back. I told them I had no idea what they were on about, but that if all spirits wasn't translating it, likely didn't feel like dealing with the two of them. And I watched the snake glare at the bird gripe at the snake, and all spirits trot back to its pot to play potted plant. My household's little fellows were a lively bunch. All spirits told me only that they were both idiots, then sat quiet, the one creature in the house that understood every tongue, and the bickering over whether a plant could overeat left it a little sad and embarrassed, since before its consciousness fully woke, soaking up nutrients had only been instinct. I just smiled, lit the stove to heat the dishes, and bought 20 portions of meat to dice. Calling each other idiots really did sound like children squabbling, when in my old world grown people rarely traded the word. Dinner only needed warming, so I diced the meat onto the table with a portion set aside for all spirits. And as it neared eating time, Dark Plume dropped its argument and went to wait, Crescent Moon swaying over to its plate. I carried out a pot of stewed vegetables and sliced meat, sat, took out some bread and ate. Full night settled by then. The flame tower in the courtyard had lit as the dark came on, throwing light across most of the yard. After dinner, I tidied the 9 reusable flower pots I owned, bought 6 more, and set them out in the courtyard. My inventory still held the 10 pine tree seeds and 5 poria seeds I'd pulled from a chest. Poria a medicinal herb, and pine a material producer, and I planted the lot in soil-filled pots. After planting and watering, I picked up a pot with an unsprouted pine and ran the plant modification technique on it. Energy down 100. The system reported the pine had taken a modification effect called lush transformation. Locked from further change, the plant converted from a production crop to a buff crop, its range equal to its height, its effective 5% growth speed lift to planted crops. Stackable. The plant still at germination with no height yet. The percentage was small, but the buff stacked in the panel hinted at no time limit. I told all spirits it couldn't eat this one, that it sped every planted crop in range and our home truly needed that kind of plant, and I touched its leaf so it could learn the new mutant by feel. A pine couldn't develop a consciousness, but a plant handing out a permanent buff was worth a great deal where the others were just food. So this one I meant to keep. It told me it wouldn't eat it, that it had only eaten before out of need and could find its own food whenever there was sun, laying its leaf in my palm and tapping to say it didn't want these now, leaving out the one reason that it looked down on such things these days. I told it to say the word whenever it wanted to eat, that even with none near home I'd do my best to buy some, since my whole notion of money was to spend what I earned and earn more, as long as it paid off. After a bit more chatting, it was time for business. I'd only run enhancements that morning, the afternoon eaten by the pool and the hauling, and it was barely past 6 with full stamina and 100 energy just spent, so I'd keep at the enhancements. I left the 3 of them to play or rest in the courtyard and started raising my stamina cap again on the open ground out front, drinking potions and pairing absorption with cultivation, keeping myself moving the whole time. As the cap climbed, I stopped timing it strictly to 1 portion an hour and instead rested 10 minutes after each before going on, holding a pace of roughly 1 portion every half hour, counting breaks, all the way to midnight. Energy and stamina drained and recovered together, and by the time I called it for the night, I had 23 potions left and a stamina cap of 953 after the dual push of potions and cultivation. The cap's so high now that cultivation added more on top of each dose than it once had. I showered, lay down, checked my information in a fine mood, switched on the concentration cultivation technique, and shut my eyes. I woke and opened my information, and the night's cultivation had lifted my energy cap by over 50. The panel read me as a human planting player out of Mountain Forest Zone 9655, player 11. My energy at 356 against a base of 346 plus 10 from equipment. My stamina at 963 against a base of 953 plus 10. Combat power 64. I patted the snake head nudging into my arms, got up, went out, and picked up a flower pot to keep working the plant modification technique. This run gave the pine a yield plus 10% effect for another 100 energy. The gain small and the stage's modification count maxed, but I didn't dwell on it, having already lucked into good things the evening before. I walked the yard, saw to my own hygiene in a corner, and drank another stamina enhancement potion. If I hadn't been so worn the night before, I wouldn't have stopped at 953, that number sitting in my head, so I cultivated from a little after 5 until 6:30 and downed 2 more potions before I was satisfied, my stamina cap finally reading 1009. 4 digits at last, from 50 to 1,000, 20 times over. I tipped my head back at the long bright sky and laughed, easy and glad. Today was my 9th day in this world, and I felt like I could smash a level 1 tree bare-handed, though the weather looked a touch dangerous. The day's report called for sunny turning to thunderstorms, temperatures from 19 to 21, wind at force 8, with a quest to obtain 50 level 1 or higher seeds or seedlings for 500 survival points in a planting gift pack. Strong wind and thunderstorms then. I'd head out after breakfast while the weather still held. I went in and boiled some meat and vegetables. No great cook but no embarrassment either, and once the 3 little fellows were fed, my own meal was ready. While eating, I opened the friend interface and found 2 new requests. One from a player noting he was a cat tribe member of the beast race, another saying our IDs only differed by their numbers and we ought to add each other. Both had clearly searched off their own IDs. The cat tribe one sent past midnight while I slept, the second after 4 in the morning before I woke. I accepted both, since I'd already added one friend and a couple more cost nothing, and if we didn't get on, we simply wouldn't talk, or I'd delete them. Then I opened Impung's window. He greeted me the same grounded way, asking whether I'd eaten, and I wrote that I had not, that I was eating now. He said he could tell I'd just woken, then told me his dog had evolved, that it had taken one nap and woken up bigger than him, when it had still fit in his arms before it slept. A dog bigger than a person. I wrote back that I'd mentioned it, that my snake had outgrown me days ago, and could coil a single bed several times, since when it came to showing off little fellows I figured mine lacked for nothing. He called that too much, then argued that snakes ran long by nature, that as long as it hadn't beaten him for width it didn't really count, that he'd seen players say snake pets hatch 2 or 3 meters long and so came out longer than you by sheer measure no matter what. He said his dog was different, palm-sized at the start, then suddenly shooting past half a meter, and that he'd figured a meter long and half a meter tall at most this time. Yet it now ran over 2.5 meters of body not counting the tail, and stood a clean meter 8. I wrote that with a dog that big he could ride it for a stroll and never worry about crushing it, dropping the contest this time to praise the dog's progress, and float a new idea. He said he'd been thinking the same and was about to head out and try it, that if it carried him he could rest his legs, then signed off to go scavenge chests, and wished me luck. After we wrapped up, I finished eating, washed the dishes, and the whole family headed out, since I wanted more water in the pool before the storms hit, the level having dropped a little but not much, draining only a touch faster than the well refilled. After one trip out and back, all spirits patted my hand with a leaf, shook its flower, and said it wasn't going out, the wind too strong to carry it safely, and it wanted to try some new little games at home while the sun still held. I told it to rest at home, that I'd keep fetching water, the day's quest simple and nothing else pressing. I went out with the bucket, ran back to empty it into the pool and ran out again, and though no material residue sat in the mountain spring puddle today, the pebbles had plainly shifted, the neighbor likely come to hunt again. As I worked, the water rose bit by bit, and when it stood about 10 centimeters from the ground I finally stopped. Not because the level was enough, but because lightning was already flickering. The clouds hung low, the sky gone dark, and muffled thunder rolling. The storm broke, thunder and rain, though inside the house the wind hardly registered. I sat by the pool, watching crescent moon play in the water, reached out to bring it close, and touched the cool scales while outside the wild wind howled, and the thunder roared. In the courtyard the wind and rain ran just as fierce, yet carried a strange peace. Nothing blowing away even a blade of grass I held up, only drifting slow to the ground once I let go. A warp sensation where reality and illusion overlapped. Crescent moon lifted its head from the pool, wrapped my wrist, and tugged, trying to pull me in, and I told it I wouldn't be getting in, that I'd cultivate instead. That the steady enhancing left me a little lightheaded, but there was nothing to fear in this weather as long as I stayed put. I let it play, opened the trading interface, and spent 4,950 survival points on 50 portions of level 1 chive seeds to clear the day's task. The gift pack yielding 10 portions of level 1 soil. Tasks done, money in hand. No shortage of food or drink. There wasn't much weighing on me. While I found open ground, Dark Plume snatched the mud-caked all spirits, flew it to the pool, and dropped it into wash, and I watched it come up with both leaves splashing, while I kept my face still so as not to break up their fun. The cultivation ran on through the wind and rain. No chill, no cold. Portion after portion went down. Only 21 potions remaining, so I stopped taking breaks and kept on as long as my body held. From 11 until 6:30 after dark, 7.5 hours with nothing but a few cucumbers and tomatoes for energy. I burned through all 21, my stamina cap rising another 478 on the day. Early on, with energy to spare, the cultivation ran alongside the potions. But as energy fell to single digits, the cultivation cut out, and only the potions kept absorbing. That exhausted my 50-time limit on level 1 potions, meaning from here, I'd need level 2 or pure cultivation to climb. None of it troubled me, except my body had gone slightly off, the stamina cap at 1,487, against an energy cap of only 346. The wide gap leaving body and consciousness a little out of step, though it might only have been that I'd pushed too hard in a single stretch. I told the little fellows I was too lazy to cook, that I'd cut the meat and buy myself something, and once inside I bought and chunked meat under the curious stares of the snake and bird. Then I spent 5,800 survival points on a portion of player-made dumplings, green quality level 1 chive and pork that raised spirit recovery 5% for 2 hours. A full pound of skin and filling since crafting players' food could carry boosts, though the price ran steep. I'd seen players talk about it, that those who knew how to cook used materials efficiently and turned out boosted food, while crafting players who couldn't cook but forced dishes through skills ended with gray-tagged food, damaged ingredients, no boost. The other crafts ran the same, weavers landing slightly better success and quality, farming players supposedly getting more from land area spacing and companion planting. I knew none of it, but I was doing just fine. I told them to play, that I'd washed the plates when I woke and was only a bit tired, and after eating my fill I went to bed and patted the 3 crowding around to say there really was no problem. All spirits patted my hand, told me to sleep well, and said it would take the 2 idiots to the courtyard to exercise, and they'd come back once tired. So well behaved. After they went out I listened to the yard and smiled, all of them good babies. I checked the chat channel I'd ignored all afternoon, and aside from people lamenting nearly being blown off their feet or struck by lightning, there was nothing new. Switching to friend messages, I opened the 3 sent at noon. Impung was the same as ever, showing off how majestic his dog looked, and I replied to 2 of his, saying I'd cultivated until now and missed the channel, then praised the dog's hard work and asked whether it had grown and was eating more. He answered right off, wailing that he could no longer earn enough for the dog's keep, grieving the shame of being supported by a cat and a dog, and I wrote that I quite liked being supported by my little fellows, and he should get used to it. Predictably, he sent another round of lamenting, accusing me of showing off sideways again. Our usual rhythm. Not much novelty, but both of us enjoying it. And after he said he was off to dig a pool too, the chat ended. The Cat Tribe player had written asking whether it was a good time to trade races and taboos. Introducing himself as a Cat Tribe player I could call Cat Little Hope. Off limits on whether he liked eating mice or snakes, but open to anything else. Then a second wondering whether I was busy. I wrote back that I'd been practicing and hadn't seen it, then opened the 3rd friend. This one looked to be a chatterbox too. He'd opened with a hello, then introduced himself as an elf race player named Prosperous Star who'd lived 319 years before coming here, a gathering player, asking after mine. After that came a string of nudges asking whether I was busy, telling me to answer when I saw it, mentioning his mountain's trees blown down in swathes, then every 2 or 3 hours a fresh one hoping I was safe, wishing me peace, saying the thunder was too loud to dare go out and he'd keep waiting. I was a little curious about an elf claiming 3 centuries, but it wasn't the moment to ask, so I changed his note and replied that I'd been cultivating since morning. Human race, name Yuwu, farming player, 22 years old, matching what he'd sent. He wrote back glad I was fine, that a 22-year-old human cultivating a full day was diligent and remarkable, that in his old tribe such a young person would have stunned the elders, then asked whether he talked too much and apologized. I wrote that it was fine, that I liked chatting too but stayed busy and couldn't check messages mid-cultivation. Impun had just pinged me to look at the channel, where players argued over whether the thunderstorm counted as a disaster, many saying they'd watched trees and animals struck by lightning out in the day, the kind of thing that might catch a player by accident. The only sure thing was that weather wouldn't harm a player who stayed in, but players had to go out for supplies. The gathering folk worst off, some claiming they had no food, a few saying mornings were safe and only getting scolded for lacking sympathy. I glanced at the commotion and let it go. Impung wrote again asking how much truth I put in that player with the ID 800,000, the one talking about sending his servant out to die. I scrolled up and found it. The player saying that once a servant card was used, it couldn't be put away or traded, that the servant's gaze ran too fierce, and since it wasn't an enemy he couldn't kill it himself, so he'd sent it out to wait under a tree for the lightning. Players piled on, some calling him vicious and saying he should release it rather than send it to die, others suggesting he simply work it to death, still others agreeing the weather suited the job. A few spoke from the servant's side, that an unlucky one drawing such a master would become a vengeful ghost and drag the player down to die with it. I wrote to Impung that I didn't know how true it was, but the reasoning held, since nobody would want a hate-filled servant nearby. I had no interest in servants or slaves, since even though neither could betray a master, I wanted nothing to do with beings that were once players and stayed conscious and full of resentment. Impung wrote that he wouldn't want one either, that he'd sell any card that dropped from a box, that with cats and dogs at home and his own hands for chores he had no need of the thing. Then he caught himself, saying that wasn't the point, that what he meant was whether ID 100,000 was phishing, deliberately posting to nudge other servant holders into trying the same, since servant cards sold at the auction and weren't even expensive. The auction held thousands of servant cards, each opening to basic information, race, life stage, gender, and combat power, with a profile image almost a photograph. A level 1 card showed a beast race fox tribe adult male at combat power 13 bid to 11,900 survival points. Below it ran a human adult male at 4 to 6,500, a human female cub at 5 to 8,850, a beast rabbit tribe female cub at 3 to 8,990, and on down. The human images wore the normal forms I knew in the novice 3-piece set, the beast race ones carrying simple decorations on their fur, mostly the same novice gear once you'd seen a few. I wrote that we couldn't read a beast race face, but that if someone spotted a familiar, important person, they really might raise the card until it met the standard to restore player status. I'd never known what servant cards looked like before, but seeing them I understood why the setting allowed resurrection, since a person who found a former relative, friend, or lover might truly throw money and resources at them. Impung wrote that it made the whole thing more frightening, asking how long it would take to raise an ordinary human with a few points of combat power to the revival standard, and whether eye shifts even squared with the rule that servants were uncontrollable. The channel raised the same point, that emotion in the eyes would conflict with the original word, though most of the talk had turned to how to use servants, and whether the ways of destroying them ran too brutal. I wrote that emotion shouldn't exist by rights, that he should just watch the channel, that since he didn't want a servant there was no need to stress, then added that I was warned from cultivating and going to rest and might not see fresh topics until I woke. I sent the two, glanced at the channel once more, and closed the interfaces. Some players, feeling unseen, had grown more uninhibited, openly promoting how to abuse servants, especially the pretty cubs of various races, the few leading it getting more graphic and only saying more when called perverts. I knew well enough that this world held no notion of good or evil, that players kept to their own areas and could say what they liked, and that even a player who couldn't stomach it had no way to interfere. A survival game was meant for players to gather resources their own way and grow strong, since only the strong lived better. But certain lines still had to hold, a line being the thing that restrained you, so that after seeing much you could still be the self you liked. The reflections didn't keep me up long, and a few minutes on I dropped into a quiet, dreamless sleep inside the cultivation, the way concentrated meditation always made sleep easy and complete. While I slept, the snake and bird in the yard ran combat drills in the back, since the field and the planted crops had all been eaten, and only the chive patch remained out front. All spirits stayed out of it but kept a bossy watch, glaring to make sure neither slacked, while the gale and rain went on, thunder rolling, lightning flashing now and then. Dark Plume practiced snatching at snake scales while Crescent Moon dodged and tried to counter. No skills used, just a snake and a bird trading blows between ground and air. By the water pit under the mountain spring, the red great snake pressed its head to the earth and watched the rowdy pair, flicking its tongue. This family on the mountaintop kept getting more entertaining. That mutated plant had a point. The snake's instinctive reactions weren't enough, and the bird's aerial work was poor, though they didn't get many chances to learn. Hatched by that human, carried whenever they went out, even sleeping in a bed. Even the gluttonous plant had been raised crooked. Shrinking its form to move was normal enough, but there was no need to twist into human legs and feet, or learn to run and walk and jump like a person. Leaves mimicking hands to hug and pat. The red great snake found it awkward, yet liked this family very much all the same. By that bird's measure, this human's growth already outran most ordinary humans, and in the evening the bird that had visited before came again to talk over what it had seen, offering comparisons. This person had good luck, the bird said, and the great snake answered it had known as much for a long time, or a mountain spring like that would never have surfaced on the summit. His aptitude ran poor, low even among humans, but the cultivation technique he'd gotten was so simple that as long as he didn't try to alter it, there'd be no cultivation damage. The one fault worth criticizing was that he was too settled, with no wish to fight at all, where most humans elsewhere took to fighting readily, and even without targets would spend their free time hardening themselves on trees, punching and kicking one until it broke, and finding a fresh one. I woke and found Dark Plume perched by my pillow, stroked its feathers, and told it good morning. What a comfortable sleep that had been. It rubbed its head against my palm, hopped twice, then stretched toward the pond, the clumsy snake already off to play in the water. I figured as much and told it to go play too, that I'd make something to eat and run a few tasks, since there was still time before dawn. I got out of bed and bought meat to mince into meatballs, but a few cuts in I realized I didn't have to make everything from raw materials, that while finished dishes with attributes ran expensive, I could easily buy ones without. Crafting players took heavy material consumption, and when it turned out high-quality semi-finished goods they made money, but most came out white quality and stayed white, and white goods, carrying no boost, always ran cheaper than raw materials. I opened the consignment, searched lean ground meat, and bought a portion for 590 since players said 290 since players said 2 portions of meat made 1 of ground meat, a saving of 70. But would Dark Plume and the others like it? I called the 3 in, figuring they'd know after a taste, and asked all spirits whether this meat differed from what I'd chopped before. I fed Crescent Moon a raw ground meatball, and it tilted its head with a wronged look, saying it wasn't tasty. All spirits stood on the snake's head, swaying its half-open flower, and relayed that the snake found it not nutritious, just like the food scraps I'd fed it before. Edible, not tasty, not nutritious. Food scraps. I took out a piece of bread and waved it at Crescent Moon, having let it try crumbs once before, and worked it out. The not nutritious part meant no attributes. So raw materials carried nutrition even without attributes, and these, staying white after processing, had lost their nutrition somewhere in the making. I told them it was fine, to go play, that I'd keep on since these were for me and it made no difference. Since I wasn't a crafting player and any dish I made, however skilled, came out white quality, where players who couldn't cook at all forced it and landed gray food off bad timing. By comparison, I felt I did pretty well, at least edible, and to my own taste, decent enough. I sent the 3 out to the yard, chopped green onion, ginger, and garlic, salted and oiled the ground meat to mix it even, and set water boiling for a pot of cabbage and meatball soup, not idle while it heated, putting meat into the fertilizer machine and cutting the bought meat into chunks large and small for the little fellow's breakfast. Chopping done, vegetables in, meatballs dropped, I finally checked the panel. Day 10, daytime hours laid out, overcast, 11 to 15 degrees, wind at force 5. The day's task to build one farming exclusive field for 2,000 survival points and a large planting gift pack, a special one, a nursery field, the farming player's exclusive field. I'd gotten the recipe for it from a planting gift pack back on the 6th day but hadn't tried it. The material's heavy and my focus all on self-strengthening these past days. And now was a good time, though no rush. After breakfast, I switched to the chat channel, which ran lively, found nothing worth catching, and moved to friends, where all 3 had written. Impung's first, sent last night a while after I'd said I was sleeping. Told me he was off to bed too, worn out, and we'd chat in the morning. His second, around 4:30, wished me good morning, said he'd finished his daily tasks and figured I wasn't up, so he'd go check the channel for fresh topics. I wrote back that he'd had it right. I really hadn't been up, and moved to the next. Cat Little Hope had written near midnight, 10 minutes apart, calling me a diligent one who surely had it hard. Mentioning the channel said the human race was the weakest but the most enduring. Then a second wondering if I'd gone training again or was asleep, saying he was off to cultivate himself. I replied that I'd been asleep, that daytime training wore me out so I'd slept until now, and switched again. Prosperous Star's message had come around 6, a simple good morning to his hard-working human friend. Nothing after since I hadn't been awake. I wrote back a good morning and returned to Impung, who'd sent 3 in the space of a minute. He said I could really sleep, that he'd been so tired he just dropped into bed last night, woke after 5 or 6 hours and got a lot done. Then he wrote that he meant to tell me last night but forgot, and asked about that level 2 material, whether I could propagate seeds on my side. He said that yesterday he'd been led to a wild level 2 chest that held a level 1 breeding farm blueprint, and though it only raised level 1 animals, it allowed animal propagation and evolution, with a chance at quality or level advancement. That breeding farm had given him hope of raising level 2 animals, or just raising and selling them. More profitable either way than ordinary farming had ever been. Since animal husbandry had a thing like that, he figured planting ought to have its equivalent too. Only last night's talk about the servant had made him forget the main topic entirely.